In her search, the heroine held a map that would lead her to the unknown ahead of her. Pulling her hood over her face, she hid from the prying eyes around her. But amber eyes shone with their beauty in the darkness, finding what was marked on the map. It was the temple that she approached closer. Looking up, the young woman searched for the statue that grants wishes. Stopping in front of the stone man, she held only one thought in her mind. She was ready to die for her. Unexpectedly, the statue began to speak, wanting to know what the girl desired. But she desired only one thing, that her ex-husband would fall in love with her again. When the heroine recalled his image, her heart shattered into pieces. Her emotions made her cry out, a desperate wish for something else. The stone man, hearing this, descended as if it served his own purpose. Everything around began to crumble, the girl falling ever lower. And, as she was already sitting on his knees, she beheld before her something great. Standing before the heroine, Beldemir, our great friend, promised to be her husband. And that's how Renée Lafour got her handsome second husband, clearly better than the first, especially in that cute apron. He was not only good in body, but in character. Who wouldn't like such a hot, handsome guy? The first husband didn't get it, of course. The second one started asking questions too. It seems Renaya is in quite a bind. I wonder how she plans to get out of this situation. Gently touching Renea's hand, her first husband tried to explain to her that it was just a brief affair. Renea didn't understand what was happening, as she hadn't expected such gentle treatment. But the man promised that she would be his only woman. Holding her gently at the waist, Beldemir spoke to his wife in a soft voice. He wanted to know what his dear wife was doing right before him. Renee's heart was ready to burst from his chest right now. He was so beautiful that it was hard to resist. This is a tale of rescue from being a wife to two husbands. So let's return to the temple, where Renea was still kneeling, before that stone man. Renya was making wishes, desperately wanting to be happy. Actually, this was truly a significant reason. Her father, Cariolano, hid his pain from the loss of his wife at an early age behind the pursuit of wealth. He did everything possible to amass a considerable fortune, but his greatest dream was high status. And most of all, her father was captivated by the heir of a ruined aristocratic family. Edwin Lepore gladly accepted such a son-in-law. He understood from an early age that love wasn't the most important thing in life. Just as Edwin desired to get rich, so too did Rania's father want to gain status through her marriage. Yet walking to the altar, Rania didn't crave a noble name. She wanted just one thing, to beautiful true love. Her husband was different. Many things upset him. For example, how Renia's father manages the money, and this discontent began to extend to his completely innocent wife. 3 years later, at the Lepore estate, something truly terrible began to unfold. Renia was shocked to hear Edwin speak the same words of love, but this time, not to her. Freya, the maid whom Renia's father sent to settle their debts, quickly captured Edwin's heart from the very moment they met. Renia bit her nails watching Freya, because she had managed to achieve in such a short time what the heroine couldn't in 3 years. With a weight on her chest, she still kept moving forward. Entering Freya's room, Renia apologized, explaining she only wanted to find her missing earring. But suddenly, her sharp eye caught sight of something. Freya's bag held a suspicious map that Renia immediately noticed and examined. Opening it, the girl realized that this map leads to a statue that grants wishes and desires. Suddenly, Renia thought that this might be how Freya won Edwin's favor and affection. There were many thoughts, but only one desire. Maybe this will help. So, since things couldn't get any worse, Renia set off in search of the statue, and that's how she ended up in the temple, kneeling before a stone man. By the way, in her mind, this should have happened much faster and easier. Renya already thought how to thank the magic statue, and after that, she will run home happily. Poor naive woman. She had no idea what was coming for her, that her happiness wouldn't last long. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the Duke's estate. Regina was shocked that her husband was on the brink of life and death, and she also blamed herself for it, as she believed it was all because of her foolish desire. Her tears dripped right onto his face, and then a miracle happened, one that no one expected. The dead husband suddenly came back. Renia jumped in shock and surprise. Trying to get up from her knees, she stumbled over her own legs. It seems that this silly wish worked, as my husband suddenly started showing signs of affection, but like a living dead, so Renia started to kill her zombie husband. From that day on, Edwin swore his love to her endlessly, but Renia couldn't accept the feelings of a corpse. Edwin was decaying more and more each day, so Renia decided it was time to bury him for good. Whether he was dead or alive, or perhaps still dead, her husband resisted. But Renia, she just kept on, burying him with dirt. Thoughts were unnecessary at that moment, for the dead must rest in their grave, undisturbed. Edwin didn't immediately grasp the reason he was being rejected. In Renia, her ex-husband's stern gaze began to frighten her. He knew how to keep them together for an eternity. Grabbing Renia by the shin, Edwin started pulling her into the grave. The heroine tried to resist, but it was all in vain. The man's wild, frantic eyes revealed the depths of his disgusting and filthy desire. He asked him not to be afraid, because all he wants is to be with Rania always. The main character clearly didn't want that kind of love. Something went wrong. Edwin kept insisting he would love her even beyond death, no matter what. And so our heroine met her end, driven by the madness of her love for him. Now she only thought about how she shouldn't have worried about Edwin and Freya's romance, but wished for something wise instead. Perhaps she should have been better. Looking up, she realized she had traveled back in time. Now she has been given yet another chance at a good life. So what will Rania wish for this time? Okay, at least the statue's covered now. The fog could have been confusing. The stone man wanted to know what the young maiden standing before him desired. This time, Rania felt a bit nervous and sensed a certain tension in the air. She also wondered why she was wearing the same clothes, as if she didn't realize she had traveled back in time. But after some time, Rania was able to come up with this idea. She tugged her cheek and let go sharply, confirming once more that it wasn't a dream. So it hurts, which means this isn't a dream. The statue has a stern look. It seems the man is tired of waiting. With bulging eyes, Rania suddenly remembered why she had come to this temple. According to the map, there are several rules you must follow to succeed in this task. So, the very first rule is that you need to make your wishes before the sand runs out in the hourglass. Rule 2. You are allowed to make only one wish at a time. And thirdly, once you have made a wish, it cannot be cancelled or altered in any way. Anyone who attempts to break these rules will be deprived of their limbs. Yes, the price is high, but the worst part is, the trespasser will also turn to stone. Maybe handsome, maybe not. It's up to you. Rania did not believe that her statue would be as beautiful, so she fiercely did not want that. So, with a clever little expression on her face that we weren't shown, she began to make a wish. As they say, you learn from your mistakes. So this time, Rania decided to wish for wealth. A good choice, wouldn't you agree? But the statue interrupted her, as it already knew what she wished last time. Well, it seems something went wrong. It seems the heroine wished to be a beloved wife, to which the stone man agreed. Approximately 92 characters. And so, the second chance to make a sensible wish was lost. Approximately 65 characters. The man kept urging the lady, as there wasn't much time left for them. It was time to stop lying around and pulling her hair out. She needed a plan fast. So, using the first part of the wish, I want my husband to come up with something next, and let the heroine decide. Perhaps she wanted her husband to be happy. Such traitors deserve no wishes for happiness at all. That's for sure. It's just as bad as wishing death. Rania absolutely didn't want that at all. So many thoughts. She should have come up with a good wish right away. Not even wealth could help him now. What to do? Rania found herself in a difficult situation. Holding her head, Rania didn't know what to think, and time was running out. The heroine was in a rush. Time was running out. The clock is ticking. Sand is falling. So. Assuming the crab position, Rania shouted, I want you to be my husband. The stone man is in shock. Rania is in shock. Everyone is in shock. But you know what? It was the best. Yes, the guy is so shocked that he asked to repeat his wish once more. Through tears and shame, Rania repeated it one more time. In this way, by ruining her past life, Rania has also ruined her present. Apparently, she thought this was the very best. And the stone man could do nothing about it anymore. He'd have to comply. The only thing that bothered him was that Rania wasn't happy. Blaming it all on shock, the heroine pretended to be incredibly happy. And then, after a few seconds, the statue began to crack. She was falling apart. And so, Mr. Wish Granter kindly asked the young lady to step aside. Everything was falling apart. The temple seemed to collapse. Rania was worried, not understanding what was happening. The heroine fell from the roar of big rocks. Falling to his knees, an unexpected scene unfolded before him. A cobblestone became a person. Anyone would be shocked by that. Rubbing his shoulder, the man wondered why the girl was so surprised. Really, as if this was something you saw every day. Not understanding what was happening, Rania couldn't think clearly, but the guy thought he couldn't be both a statue and a husband, though it depends on perspective. For your information, Beldamer, he's the new husband of Rania, or rather, her man now. Now the heroine's wish will finally come true. Confused, Rania struggled to regain her composure. The statue shed its stone exterior, and beneath it emerged an incredibly beautiful man. A perfect 10, so stunning that Rania began to feel embarrassed by his beauty. Overall, there was much that still surprised her. But let's not delve into the details. Yes, everything was so incredibly good. With trembling hands and closed eyes, she pointed to something truly magnificent. Beldamer also noted his appearance, but did not attach much importance to it. Husband and wife, after all. So Beldamer, like a gentleman, pulled Rania closer to him. Gleaming with charms, he whispered in her ear, Don't look away. After all, she is now his wife, which means she can admire him any time. Seems the new husband is rushing things, and so, the heroine ruined another life. though it depends on perspective. As she walked along the forest path, Rania wondered if Beldamir would truly be her husband. Many desired him, but only she became his wife, capturing his heart. There were those who secretly snuck into the bedroom to spend the night with Beldamir. Others aimed a knife at him, filled with fierce desire. Recalling those wondrous days, Beldamira noted how problematic the situation had truly been. Hearing Beldamira's story, Rania realized he hadn't always been a statue, and the man noted that no one had desired to be with him so fiercely, except Rennie. Beldamir promised to be the perfect husband, flawless. But the heroine wasn't very pleased. The only thing that Beldamir warned about was that Rania should not touch him at all. To look, but not to touch. What a horror. Beldamir was attentive, so he asked why Rania was upset, but she chose not to answer his question, leaving him puzzled. Walking through the dark forest, the man wondered where he was being led. Regina, walking ahead, didn't know how to answer that question, but she knew about the empty house, so she decided to go there. This estate belongs to the guild, but it's been left empty due to ghost rumors. It has been empty for about 3 years, so it was the perfect place to hide the second husband. Beldamir was bothered they couldn't go to Rania's house, or the residence, but Rania justified everything by saying the guild provides her housing. Lately, it's been common to hear about the guild. Perhaps Rania is working there now. After preparing everything for Beldamir, Rania decided it was time to leave, promising to return tomorrow with his clothes. As she left, she was terribly nervous, remembering whether or not she had told Beldamir about the ghost. Thinking too much isn't helpful, so Rania took a deep breath and went about her day. As Beldamir was left alone, he pondered when he last felt such a sense of freedom. The crisp, frosty air, a gentle caress against his skin, the feeling of cold on the tip of his nose, the smell of dust penetrating his lungs. Suddenly, he pondered about the dust, believing that Shapiro is completely unaware of his return to the human form. There's no help to be expected from anywhere, so I have to rely on this body and properly tidy up the house. Running fingers through, Beldamir reached out his hand, but nothing happened. It seems that his magic didn't work here at all. This was to be expected, for Beldamir was cursed after all. Suddenly, from somewhere, a voice was heard, laughing at him with all its might. Beldamir started looking for the sound's source. Now he understood something was creeping around the house, so I decided to explore the house. Suddenly, outside the window, someone's shadow darted past him, but Beldamir continued to follow that sound. That morning, as Rania decided on the estate, screams echoed all around. The maid who encountered the lady was utterly shocked by her appearance, and she thought maybe her mistress got into a fight. Rania was too mature for fights, so such behavior was out of the question. At that moment, she was only concerned about whether her father knew of her nighttime escapades, to which the maid replied, yes. Moreover, she also informed that Lady Freya had gone missing, and since Rania was absent, Edwin began to suspect her. Sighing, the maid explained that the lady was justified, as there was a witness. Now she was interested in where the lady was. Rania didn't know how to answer this question, as it was hard to explain having a second husband, but grabbing the maid, Annie, by the shoulders, she asked her to listen closely. And so, Rania began her story about Freya's stolen map. Holding the map in her hands, Annie still couldn't quite believe that a statue capable of granting wishes actually existed. Wasn't it just a legend? Rania thought so too at first, even though she headed straight for the temple. But now, having lived through it, the heroine could say with certainty that it was all true. With shame in her eyes, Rania told the maid's story, causing her to cover her mouth. Yes, it's true. Not every day a second man appears with a living husband. Annie immediately started to get nervous, because polygamy went against the king's laws. And if the lady is caught, she'll get 10 years. Well, this historic smile speaks volumes about how Rania missed her second chance so perfectly. What if Beldamir finds out that Renee is already married? Jumping up abruptly, the heroine seemed to realize how to get out of this situation. With fire in her eyes, she decided the only way out was divorce. She clearly didn't need praise. Rania would praise herself anyway. A brilliant thought, but it wasn't enough for her, as everything was not so simple. Annie asked where the lady had put her new husband, to which the heroine replied, in the house with the ghosts. The maid also began to wonder why Lady Edwin's clothes were of interest to her. Still had to explain to Annie somehow that Rania's new husband was completely naked right now. So, packing her things, Rania headed for the guild hall. Turning around, she spotted something odd on the ceiling. She almost fell from sheer surprise. Biting her lip, Rania kept calming herself with the thought that there were no ghosts in the estate. Yet she couldn't shake that odd feeling, as if someone was watching her, so she kept turning her head from side to side, trying to figure out who was watching her. And the old wooden floors, with their creaking, only intensified the fear. Clutching the doorknob, the heroine swallowed, because after the animated statue, who knew what could be in there? And still, she had to believe, so she turned the doorknob and pushed it open. Slamming the doors open, Rania shouted loudly, trying to banish the spirit. Laughing at her actions, the heroine let out a sigh of relief as she had convinced herself that evil spirits do not exist. But lifting her head upwards, she didn't immediately notice something flying above her, but by the time she could make out what was flying overhead, the fear was already immense. Hearing the girl's scream, the evil spirit immediately turned its attention to her. Renaya quickly closed the door, not wanting to think about that scary place. Statues come to life, ghosts fly around, and lately, she's been lucky with odd things. Suddenly, a man appeared behind her, making his presence known. The heroine was so scared, she didn't recognize who was in front of her. Could it be that this is a ghost? For her own safety, Renia quickly moved several meters away. A slight smirk on the stranger's face seemed very suspicious to her. However, he proudly declared that he was neither a phantom nor a human being. Allow me to introduce Shapiro, loyal servant of the great Beldamir. Shapiro came to escort the lady to the gentleman. Thus, Renia was able to bring Beldamir the outfit that fit her perfectly while she was sitting. The heroine was pleased that her new husband fit the old clothes, though it's better to say the first for now. Still, she was staring so intently at Beldamir's naked body, perhaps to determine its size. But Shapiro quickly shattered these naive assumptions, for he knew exactly what was going on. Blushing and looking away, Renia decided to speak her mind on the matter. She also asked why others touch Beldamir so freely and without care. After all, she thought he didn't like it when anyone touched him. Or maybe it's because Shapiro is a man, so it's allowed for him. Shapiro's head started to ache from these foolish assumptions. He's already said enough about himself. And the most important information was that Shapiro wasn't human. He can't be called either a man or a woman, so Renia wondered who he really was. Shapiro seemed to be ignoring the question and started talking about his charming gentleman, which inspired such admiration in young ladies that mountains of love letters piled up. And when important letters got lost in all this paper clutter, Beldamir decided to create a familiar. A familiar, a supernatural being that serves a wizard or witch in their magical practices. It seems everything is becoming clear now, because the young, talented wizard created Shapiro. Admiring his master, Shapiro also made sure to admire himself as well. And so, Shapiro was accidentally created, practically a perfect being in every way. From this story, Renia realized that Beldamir was indeed a true magician. But who is this magician with such a muscular physique? While Renia looked around, Shapiro congratulated the lady on her wedding. He was also glad that the lady didn't try to deceive the man. Maybe she really is special. Renia didn't understand the meaning of these words, so she wondered. At first, Shapiro thought the master couldn't use magic because of Renia, but later realized that couldn't be the case. As soon as Renia heard about it, she immediately slammed her hands on the table. Beldamir didn't want to say it, but it seems there's no avoiding the question any longer. So, he won't be able to harm Renia, but then the question remains, what is that thing down there? Slapping the table and standing up, the heroine wondered if it was magic. Exploring the castle, the heroine was shocked to discover an alchemical laboratory hidden within its walls. It turned out that a spell had been cast on the alchemical laboratory. Clenching his fist, Renia couldn't hold back his feelings. She didn't realize what animal had lived here all this time without paying rent. Seeing the cups move on their own, Beldamir found himself pondering a question. Why did Shapiro's magic work, but he is gone? Perhaps it's due to a curse. Approaching the gentleman, Shapiro decided to voice his assumption. Perhaps this is because the wish of Lord Renia has not yet been fully fulfilled. After fulfilling a wish, Beldamir usually turns back into a statue, but this time it didn't happen, and Shapiro notices that there's a meaning to what's going on. A man with dark hair gazes at his hand, marked with a magical symbol, pondering how many wishes he granted before meeting Renia. Shapiro clarifies that there were 50 such wishes, and Beldamir agrees, confirming his suspicion about the count. He realizes that Renia's wish has not yet been fulfilled, which is why he continues to remain in his human form. The question arises, why is he still human if the desire is not fulfilled? And Shapiro suggests that it is currently in the process of being fulfilled. They both conclude that this explanation is logical and continue to ponder the situation. Reflecting on Renia, Beldamir notes that her desire turned out to be rather abstract, which ultimately complicates its fulfillment. Shapiro reflects on the significance of a husband's role and ultimately comes to the conclusion that, for a woman, he is simply the man she chose to marry. Shapiro is suddenly surprised as an important thought hits him, and his reaction instantly grabs everyone's attention. Beldamir and Shapiro discuss the situation, and it becomes clear that the reason might be the lack of an official marriage between the characters, which raises new questions for them. The reflections continue, and the thought arises that declaring themselves husband and wife doesn't yet make Beldemir Rania's legal husband, as a real ceremony is required for that. Shapiro clarifies that Beldemir and Rania have not yet had their wedding ceremony or exchanged vows, confirming his suspicions and prompting Beldemir to reflect on this. At that moment, Beldemir shows a genuine sense of care, noting that among all of his familiars, it is Shapiro who comes closest to perfection, which, in turn, evokes sincere emotions from him. Rania enters the room, and the conversation smoothly shifts to the topic of marriage, becoming a new discussion point for the characters. Beldemir notices that Rania seems unhappy and asks about the reason for her mood, trying to understand what is troubling her. Renya admits that even when Beldemir declared his desire to become her official husband, she didn't feel any happiness, and this, becomes a reason for further reflection on her true feelings and expectations. Renia laughs and says that everything is happening too suddenly, so she feels confused. Shapiro suggests holding the ceremony tomorrow, but Renia sharply objects and grabs him by the shoulders. Beldemir is surprised by the refusal, and Renia justifies that she has reasons not to agree. The girl explains that she can't get married without a wedding dress, which she won't have time to prepare. She adds that she wants to arrange a banquet, choose a beautiful venue, and invite witnesses and a priest. Beldemir decides that it's better to understand Renia's wishes and agrees to do as she wants. Renya is happy and thanks Beldemir for support and understanding. Inside, she promises herself she'll definitely have a beautiful wedding. Shapiro notices the house among the trees and realizes that Miss Freya lived here. Annie looks at the house with interest, wondering about its inhabitants. Renya says Freya lived here with her family for the last 3 months. Annie admits that she doesn't always understand Renia, and she knocks on the door to see if anyone is inside. The girl hears the house is empty and no one lives here. An elderly man explains that an old man used to live here, but he died a year ago. Annie is surprised, as she'd heard a family lived here, and she suspects someone might have moved in after the old man's death. The old man clarifies that after his death, the house remained empty, and Annie realizes this with surprise. Against the sunset, an apology sounds, full of regret and respect for the lady. Freya, the red-haired maid, apologizes for the inconvenience to Edwin and Renia, her tone sincere and soft. Renia, holding a cup, repeats her apologies, sensing the tension hanging in the air around them. Edwin, the blonde-haired count, is about to stop Freya, but Renia asks him to wait just a moment. Regina carefully places the cup on the table, expressing her joy at the maid's return. The atmosphere grows warmer, and everyone feels relief after a long period of tension. Renia is about to share important news with Edwin and Freya. Her gaze is calm and determined. In the library, she admits she wants a divorce and gets a short answer from her first husband. Edwin is surprised by what he hears, as this decision comes as a complete shock to him. Freya looks at the count and says that he is free now, while Edwin insists that there is nothing between them. Renia, lost in thought, asks her ex-husband about his feelings, her voice sounding gentle. Edwin is at a loss for words. His silence reveals his inner confusion and turmoil. The man admits he's not ready for a divorce right now, and the atmosphere in the room becomes tense. Regina calmly inquires about the reason for this decision, expecting an honest answer. Edwin says he wants to delay the divorce talk until after his sister Mary's wedding. Renia thinks to herself that it all comes down to money again, and feels disappointed. She agrees to his request, understanding that she can't object right now. At that moment, Renia turns to Freya, intending to share a few words with her. Freya feels embarrassed, while Renia admits that she was too harsh on her. The maid is surprised by the confession and struggles to respond. Renia asks Freya to accept her apology as she leaves. Realizing it's too late, she promises not to bother Edwin and Freya again, leaving them in the library's quiet. Edwin watches Renia leave in surprise, not fully grasping her actions. Renia steps into the hall, realizing she's finally said everything she truly meant. Inside herself, she wonders if she has become so brave because she has already faced death. The girl notes that it actually turned out to be not as painful as she expected. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a loud scream, which brings Renia back to reality. Annie excitedly runs towards Renia down the corridor, and Renia turns in surprise. The maid notices tears on her mistress's face, but Renia waves her away, unwilling to discuss her feelings. Annie, breathing heavily, reports that something incredible has happened and prepares to share the news. Renia listens intently to Annie, preparing to hear important news. The maid reveals that Freya's story about her past was a lie, as no one actually lives in the house. Renia wonders why Freya lied and thinks it might have been part of her plan regarding Edwin all along. Annie reminds her of the stone they stole with the map, which grants wishes when used correctly. Renia wonders why Freya didn't search for this stone, as it was very important. Annie suggests Freya either doesn't know about the disappearance or knows who took it. Renia recalls that the stone vanished at precisely the moment when she made her wish. She realizes that Freya can no longer fulfill her own wish and this surprises both of them greatly. Renaya realizes that Freya will definitely start searching for the magical stone, as it's important to her. At this moment, Annie reminds them of more pressing matters, and Renaya reacts with surprise. The girl starts to explain herself to the maid, but she admits she's a little scared by her behavior. Renaya smiles, suggesting that she will once again walk down the aisle, and the atmosphere becomes lighter. Annie asks if they are talking about a wedding, and both girls smile, sharing this special moment together. Suddenly, the maid gets scared, recalling the possible consequences, and warns Renaya about it. The scene shifts to a nighttime view of the mansion, where all seems calm and mysterious. Renaya, wrapped in her cloak, reflects on her secret and realizes that keeping two husbands is becoming increasingly difficult. Regina walks down the night street, thinking that she needs to divorce Edwin as soon as possible. Suddenly, she notices someone in a hood climbing over a tall fence with ease. The girl stops and watches the stranger skillfully moving along the fence with keen interest. A sense of unease creeps into her thoughts, as this person's behavior seems suspicious. Regina decides to intervene and calls out to the stranger to find out his intentions. The guy, without taking off his hood, notices the girl, but doesn't rush to explain himself. She demands to know why he is entering someone else's home, showing her wariness. The stranger replies with a smirk, not understanding why his actions concern her so much, and the situation becomes tense. A stranger with gray hair stops, as if pondering the events unfolding around him. Renaya is surprised when the guy suddenly asks about the house where Beldamir lives, unsure how he knows this. Confused, she tries to figure out how this stranger got such information about her. A guy with a mysterious smile looks at Renaya, not in a hurry to reveal his identity, and maintains the intrigue. On the nighttime street, Renaya meets Chase, who is calmly standing by the wall and watching her. The girl cautiously asks who he is, and the gray-haired guy replies with a slight smirk on his face. Chase introduces himself and says he's looking for an ambitious mage, surprising his companion. Regina asks again what ambitious means and begins to guess at his abilities. She asks if he's a mage, and Chase confirms it with a smile. Renaya clenches her hands, preparing to talk about the ghost that appeared in the estate. The girl accuses Chase of being the one who summoned the ghost and attacks him with determination. The guy admits he did it because he lacked the money for the lab, and both soften a little, sitting together under the moon. Chase explains to Renaya that he was forced to set everything up due to a lack of money for his own lab, and he apologizes. He talks about how his father spent sleepless nights trying to save the family business, and how rumors got in the way. The guy admits he wouldn't have interfered if he'd known the estate belonged to the Coriolano Guild. Regina reflects that she now has to thank Chase for the opportunity to hide Beldamir in this place. She offers him help in exchange for silence about what happened, and trust builds between them. Regina says she wants people to keep believing in the ghost, so no one guesses who the real resident of the house is. Chase is surprised by her words, and doesn't immediately understand why she needs this, his gaze becoming wary. The guy asks again, is she really doing this for someone? And notices how Renaya clenches her fist. The girl admits that she is hiding Beldamir's presence, and Chase is struck by her determination. Renaya calmly affirms her words, and then immediately inquires about what Chase knows regarding Beldamir. She flips through the diary, lost in thoughts of the mage and his past. In the evening, in the room, Renaya and Beldamir spend time reading, enjoying a rare moment of coziness. The girl notes to herself that Beldamir is an outstanding mage and feels growing respect for him. Beldamir lies with a book, pondering how he laid the foundation of modern magical artistry and craft. Renaya wonders how someone like him could vanish and turn into a statue that grants wishes to others. The girl looks at Beldamir, and he calmly replies that her gaze will not change anything at all. The man explains that they won't be able to be together until they become legal spouses. Renya is in shock at his words and can't believe what she's heard. She decides she has to ask the important question anyway and asks Beldamir to be honest. The girl sits down next to him and insists he tell her the truth. Renya nervously begins the conversation, preparing to hear a candid answer. Beldamir gazes out the window, while Renaya thinks he couldn't have been turned into a statue for no reason. The girl suspects that he must have done something terrible for this to happen, and she feels uneasy. Regina is about to ask why this happened, but she hesitates to speak right away. She asks with agitation if she can't touch him with her hand, and Beldamir is surprised by her embarrassment. The girl admits she can't bring herself to ask the question. She's very embarrassed. Beldamir sighs and notices that Renaya clearly can't get thoughts of his body out of her head. He approaches her and asks if it is enough for her to simply have him by her side. Beldamir agrees to tell the truth, as he believes that his wife, Renaya, has the right to know everything. Renaya stands in the center of the room, listening intently as Beldamir explains the reason why she cannot touch him. The girl asks again, surprised, not fully understanding what she heard. The man calmly says that he just doesn't want this, and Rania responds with unexpected ease. Beldemir is surprised by her reaction, and she looks at him with a smile, not hiding her emotions. He seriously admits that his mood deteriorates when someone touches him, and it interferes with studying magic. Regina, with a hint of hurt, agrees that everything is clear and tries not to show her disappointment. Beldemir adds that he always avoids anything that hinders his research, but here he pauses to think. The girl notices that he's not busy with science right now, and a light, almost playful atmosphere arises between them. Beldemir smiles, thinking that Renia of course wants to touch him and embrace him with her own hands. The girl is surprised, realizing she now understands others' desires and the hidden meaning of her own wish to be a wife. The man places his hand on the book and admits he cannot agree to the touches. He hopes this explanation will suffice, while Renia looks at him in surprise and confusion. Beldemir starts to unbutton his shirt, his movements becoming more suggestive and bold. Renia, blushing, covers her face with her hands, not expecting such a move. The man allows her to look at him, baring his chest, and says he permits her to touch with her gaze. The room grows quieter, and Renia freezes, unsure of how to respond to what is happening. A servant enters the room with a tray to announce that dinner is ready, unaware of the situation inside. The sight leaves him in shock. He freezes with wide eyes, unable to utter a single word in response. Beldemir remains unperturbed, while Renia, embarrassed, covers her face with her hands, unsure of how to react. The servant, panicking, shouts a question demanding answers, and the tension in the room reaches its peak. Evening shadows hide the mansion. Freya waits for Edwin's decision, hoping for a change in their relationship. In the library, Edwin says that he can't divorce Renee due to certain circumstances, and Freya listens to him attentively. The maid asks if this is related to Lady Emily's wedding, but the man admits that it's just an excuse he chose. Edwin admits that there is another reason, one that he simply cannot reveal at this moment, and he appears quite perplexed. Freya calmly replies that he doesn't have to explain everything to her and calls him her lord, showing respect. She smiles and adds that Edwin is also not obligated to divorce, accepting his decision with understanding. Edwin thinks that among all the people in the house, only Freya had anything in common with him. He recalls how he joined this family for money, watching Freya as she tirelessly cleans the house. The only difference between them is that the maid has to put in her utmost effort every single day. Freya doesn't give up and keeps working, despite her fatigue and difficulties. Edwin takes her hands, expressing sympathy and support, and calls her by name gently. The man promises to find her a suitable home, since Renia has agreed to release her from her duties. Freya smiles and asks what will happen if her family moves with her, but quickly apologizes for the question. She firmly states that she prefers to stay here, even if life becomes harder, and she's ready to face the difficulties. Freya confesses to Edwin that her only wish is to stay close to him, as she fears she may never see him again. Edwin looks at her tenderly, realizing how important this closeness is to her. He embraces Freya, agreeing to stay together, if that's truly what she desires. The girl snuggles against his shoulder, feeling the relief and warmth this moment brings. Inside, Freya understands their decision was risky, but she doesn't regret it. A few days pass, and the day of Renia's second wedding arrives, the atmosphere filled with anticipation. Renia in her wedding dress walks down the aisle. Annie helps with her veil, saying the hostess always has luck with weddings. The girl asks Annie not to call her lady, explaining that today, she's just one of the guild, and the maid promises to remember that. Renia, in her wedding dress, marvels at his beauty and feels nervous before the ceremony. Annie notices it's the same dress from her first wedding to Edwin and is surprised by the choice. The girl walks down the path, and her fiancé's steps grow closer, creating a sense of anticipation. Beldemir approaches Renia, and with excitement, she lifts her gaze, locking eyes with him. At that moment, the girl freezes, unable to hide her surprise and a hint of anxiety. Beldemir asks if she's ready, and his voice sounds confident and calm as he speaks. The guests admire the appearance of the groom and bride, while Shapiro and Annie support them with smiles. Renia notes that she is not surprised by what is happening, as it all feels like a dream. Renia, walking beside Beldemir, thinks that he is so handsome that even the simplest garment would suit him perfectly. The girl smiles, feeling a slight excitement and joy from what's happening, her dress shimmering in the rays of light. Beldemir looks at his bride with a special expression, his gaze softening and warming. Inside, he admits his wife is extraordinary, and his heart begins to beat faster. The priest announces the start of the ceremony, inviting everyone to the altar, and the atmosphere fills with solemnity. The bride and groom walk towards the altar. Annie and Shapiro watch them with excitement and joy. Renia smiles and asks if they should hold hands, remembering that Beldemir doesn't like to be touched. She remembers his words about how other people's touch spoils her mood, and with a slight awkwardness, she agrees so that everything goes as it should. Renaya suggests that Beldemer just walk beside her to avoid any awkwardness with touching, and they both agree to this solution. The couple moves towards the altar, while Annie and Shapiro watch them, feeling excitement and joy for the newlyweds. The servant begins to cry, unable to believe his master is now engaged to such an unusual girl, while Annie resents his tears. A dispute flares up between the maid and the servant, each defending their point of view on what's happening. The priest calls for silence, so the ceremony can proceed peacefully, and everyone returns their attention to the bride and groom. The solemn moment arrives as all gather to witness the sacred union of two people. 95 characters. The priest announces the start of the legal marriage, and Renia nervously asks to speed up the ceremony. To conclude, he officially declares Beldemir and Renaya husband and wife, and the atmosphere fills with joy and relief. The priest announces that the groom must now kiss the bride, and Renia looks at Beldemir in confusion. The girl remembers that Beldemir won't even let her hold his hand, and she starts to panic. She asks to skip this moment, but the priest insists that the kiss is essential for sealing the union. Regina wonders why a kiss, specifically, is supposed to seal anything, and feels awkward. The priest decides to formally say the kiss happened, but someone's voice interrupts the ceremony. At this moment, one of the guests loudly declares that he himself will kiss the bride, surprising everyone. Renia stops Beldemir, saying he isn't obliged to do this, and the man reluctantly agrees to her request. Beldemir still says that her wish must be fulfilled, and reflects on the significance of this moment. Renia is worried that if the ceremony doesn't go as it should, her wish won't come true, and she anxiously looks at Beldemir. The girl is worried that Beldemir will kiss her, despite her dislike of touch, and she's even afraid something will happen to him. The man assures her that a mere light touch of the lips is enough to fulfill a wish, and looks at his bride with determination. He suggests doing everything quickly, so as not to prolong the moment, and cautiously approaches Renia. Annie and Shapiro watch the events unfold, not hiding their surprise and joy for the newlyweds. The servant can't believe his eyes, while Annie finds this moment incredibly romantic and sweet. Beldemir and Renaya cautiously reach for each other, their lips nearly touching, as the atmosphere fills with magic and anticipation. The kiss becomes the ceremony's climax, and Renaya feels her deepest wish finally coming true with overwhelming emotion. Against the backdrop of the sea and a white tent, Beldemir tenderly kisses Renia, while guests watch this moment with various emotions. During the kiss, the man is surprised that he doesn't feel his usual aversion to touch. Regina pulls away after the kiss, her face flushed with a blush, her breathing becoming ragged with excitement. Beldemir looks at her with surprise. His heart begins to beat faster, and he can't hide his emotions. Their lips meet again, and the atmosphere fills with tenderness and light, as if everything around them freezes. The man gently pulls Renia closer, supporting her by the shoulders so she doesn't fall from emotion. The kiss grows deeper, and they forget the guests, completely lost in their feelings and the moment they share. The priest smiles to himself, noting that these two are nothing like people who fear the slightest touch or connection. Annie looks at the servant in surprise as he panics, fearing that Beldemir might act too passionately in this moment. At this moment, the man tightly embraces Renia and continues the kiss, raising questions among those around. Their lips don't part, but their hearts beat faster and faster, and the atmosphere grows tense. With a blush on her cheeks, Renia feels the rain begin to drizzle, but she can't tear her eyes away from Beldemir. Beldemir holds the girl tightly by the waist, ignoring everything happening around them. The rain grows stronger, and the couple finds themselves in the middle of a shining magic barrier that protects them from the storm. Shapiro notices with surprise that Beldemir used magic to create a shield right in the middle of the kiss. The guests are stunned by the sight, while Rennie and Beldemir grow dizzy in a dance of kisses. Annie notices with surprise that during the kiss between Beldemir and Renia, magic begins to manifest, and she wonders if it is indeed magic. The guests watch with delight as Beldemir regains his strength during the kiss, and everyone understands that his magic has been restored. Shapiro joyfully realizes that his master has finally regained his magic and cannot hide his admiration for this moment. On a dark, rainy street, Rennie hands money to a man in a trench coat, asking him to keep everything that happened a secret. The man assures that he knows how to keep his mouth shut, otherwise he wouldn't be able to do his job. He promises to stay quiet, and Rennie and Annie watch him with a hint of disbelief, but they accept his word. Annie asks Renia if this whole ordeal is over, and the girl hopefully replies that she thinks so. Approximately 109 characters. Renaya contemplates that, as soon as her wish is granted, Beldemir must turn back into a statue, and her heart fills with unease. After the wedding, Beldemir finds himself near his statue again, and Renaya feels anxious about his fate. Annie calls out to the owner as she and Renia hurry down the rainy street, trying to hide from prying eyes. An unknown man appears in their path, watching the girls closely and clearly plotting something sinister. Renaya and Annie cautiously ask who he is, but the guy replies it doesn't matter. What counts are his vast knowledge and skills. The man hints that the Rennie family's wealth doesn't matter, and what's more important is that she's now married to 2 men. The girl is in shock as she listens to a stranger threatening her with prison time if the truth comes out. The stranger smirks and asks how much Renia is willing to pay for silence, and she sighs heavily, realizing the situation. Renaya calmly asks him what amount he desires, fully prepared to resolve the issue in order to keep her secret safe. Chase names his price for silence, demanding 50 coins, while Renaya and Annie assess the situation, approximately 108 characters. The girl agrees to the terms and sets a midnight meeting at the port to deliver the payment, approximately 99 characters. The man threatens that if Renaya doesn't come, he will tell her husband everything and hides in an alley. Renaya and Annie stay outside, pondering the upcoming deal and the need to gather the gold they require. Annie is tasked with collecting the necessary amount, while Renaya looks ahead, resolute and ready for the meeting. At this time, Beldemir sits in the tavern, recalling recent events and feeling a slight weariness. His thoughts drift back to the kiss with Renia, tender yet surprising in its unexpectedness. Beldemir recalls that moment, feeling his heart fill with warmth and joy as memories flood back. Suddenly, Beldemir ponders when Shapiro calls out to him, and his expression turns cautious and alert. Shapiro notices that the owner is too silent and wonders if everything is all right with him. Beldemir acknowledges that what is happening seems strange to him, and Shapiro agrees. The man admits that every time he closes his eyes, he sees Renia's lips, and it embarrasses him. Shapiro is surprised, but Beldemir quickly changes the subject, asking why the wish hasn't come true yet. He looks at the magic mark on his hand and notes that the number hasn't changed, and he hasn't turned back into a statue. Shapiro reminds us that Beldemir's magic only appeared during the ceremony, and now it's gone again. Beldemir contemplates what is happening, trying to understand why everything is not going as expected. Shapiro explains that while Beldemir was trapped in the statue, he studied human literature and learned much about curses. He concludes that most cursed individuals were freed only after receiving a kiss of true love. Beldemir contemplates these words and agrees that it resembles their situation quite well. The man admits that Renaya's kiss is the only way to wield magic, feeling a flush of embarrassment as he confesses this. At that moment, someone knocks on the door, and the mood in the room shifts. Regina is surprised to see Beldemir and asks why he hasn't returned to the temple yet. The man explains that her wish still hasn't been granted, and he can't leave. Regina, confused, repeats that her wish hasn't come true and starts to worry about the consequences. Renaya wonders if Edwin is the reason her wish remains unfulfilled. Feeling surprised by the thought, she realizes that Beldemir will only become a statue again after her divorce from Edwin, when he is no longer her husband. Beldemir admits that he has once again lost the ability to use his power, although the magic still worked. Renya is sure there must be an explanation for what's happening, and she begins to ponder the situation. Suddenly, it dawns on her, and with a sense of surprise, she asks again, could it really be about the kiss? Beldemir confirms her thought, agreeing with this conclusion. The man is convinced that magic returned precisely after their kiss, and Renaya blushes at the thought. Beldemir leans closer to kiss Renaya again, and a special intimacy forms between them in that moment. Beldemir unexpectedly leans towards Renia, and she shyly asks him to stop, not understanding his intentions. The girl explains that they just need to check if the magic works, and pushes the man away to avoid rushing into a kiss. Beldemir recalls his strength, and with a light flick of his wrist, conjures a magical light, confirming the return of his abilities. Outside, the rain begins to fall, and the atmosphere in the room fills with a sense of change and magic. The man admits that the kiss didn't work as expected, and wonders why the magic manifested differently. Regina joyfully realizes that the reason lies in their feelings, and a special closeness arises between them. Renaya shyly explains to Beldemir that she speaks not out of hidden motives, but to understand what's happening. She recalls that during the ceremony, the magic didn't manifest immediately after their kiss, and shares this observation. Beldemir wonders that during the kiss, nothing happened, and he starts to make his own guesses about it. The man suggests they try again to test the connection between their feelings and the magic at play. It's raining outside, and a special atmosphere of anticipation and tenderness fills the room. Beldemir and Renaya kiss again, and at that moment, magic returns, confirming their suspicions about it. The girl notices with surprise that Beldemir's power grows stronger, precisely during their kiss. Both realize their feelings and magic are closely linked, creating a new closeness between them. A loud sound comes from outside, and Renaya and Belder are pulled from their thoughts. The girl breathes a sigh of relief as she realizes her guess was correct. and now they understand how magic works. Beldemer concludes that they will have to repeat the kiss every time they need to use their power. This time, the man decides to try high-level magic to test the limits of his own abilities and skills. Renia agrees with surprise, as she has never seen such extraordinary magic before in her life. Beldemir promises to revive the wilting flowers, and the girl watches the events unfold with interest. She admits that throwing away the flowers would be wasteful, and with a smile, agrees to the experiment. At that moment, Annie enters the room to announce that the gold for the deal has been found. Annie enters the room in astonishment, where the air is filled with petals and magic, and she can't believe her eyes. Beldemir and Renia find themselves at the heart of a floral miracle, while the maid watches the unfolding events in bewilderment. Later that evening, Annie jokes with Renia, hinting at the hot atmosphere in the room and suggesting they cool off. The girls go outside, where Renia asks Annie to prepare everything for an important meeting. On the pier, they are met by a man who immediately asks if Renia has brought the gold. Having received confirmation, he says with a smirk that for her family, this sum is just a drop in the ocean. Renia calmly agrees, but notes that it's still a loss for her, and she would prefer not to pay if possible. The girl firmly clutches the bag of money, showing she's ready to defend her interests to the very end. The con man smirks and says that Reni now seems to have bought herself 2 husbands, hinting at her unusual situation. The girl calmly agrees, showing neither embarrassment nor irritation at his comment. The man suddenly changes his tone and suggests forgetting the deal, but then someone grabs the bag of gold. The captain checks the contents and confirms that the entire amount is in place, promising that he won't disappoint Renia. The man, confused, watches the scene unfold, not understanding why his plan has failed so miserably. Renia explains that she found him a job on a trading ship, as they are always short on sailors there. She warns him that if he continues to blackmail people, he will ultimately end up wasting his entire life. The man reluctantly acknowledges that Renia has inherited her father's character and learned his tricks. As the scammer leaves, he shouts after Renie that she's a witch and promises her actions won't go unpunished. The girl reflects that she has become wiser in such situations, perhaps due to being married to 2 men at once. She concludes it's not so bad after all, and gazes into the future with a light smile. Meanwhile, a magical light ignites in the temple, signaling impending changes. A mysterious figure appears in the dark hall, and the tension begins to rise. Freya anxiously studies the map, unaware of what's happening around her. She walks slowly through the hall, wondering why everything has changed. Freya screams in despair, asking why there's nothing here, and realizes her plan is in jeopardy. A few days ago, Freya discovered that the map and the stone she had painstakingly acquired had suddenly vanished. She quickly realized that it was Renia who had stolen the important items. Freya remembers how she was always obsessed with Edwin, and immediately noticed Renia's unusual behavior. She's sure that Renia stole the stone and the map, and begins searching the house. Soon Freya discovers a hidden magical stone and rejoices in her clever deduction. She realizes that all along it was Renia to blame and feels a sense of satisfaction. However, after a while, Freya finds herself in a temple where anxiety overwhelms her, and she calls out for Renia. In despair, Freya screams that Renia ruined everything and demands an explanation for what happened. The morning fills the room with soft light. Beldemir sits by the bed, while Renia sleeps peacefully under a light blanket. The girl is smiling in her sleep. Her face is relaxed, and she appears to be completely at peace. He's watching her, you know, and then he tries to use some magic, but, well, absolutely nothing happens. Beldemir notes with mild disappointment that his strength has not yet returned. He understands that the kiss is the only way to bring back the magic, and he ponders what's happening. Renia remains fast asleep, while Beldemir comes to the realization that he has no other option but to try once again. The man admits sheepishly that he must touch her lips each time he needs strength. 88 characters. Renia wakes up, glances at Beldemar in surprise, and asks why he's beside her this morning. 107 characters. Renia flees for water, embarrassed. Beldemir smiles, joking about her reaction to his morning look. A girl is surprised when a glass of water appears in her hands and can't figure out how it happened. She asks if the magic of Beldemar has returned, and he confirms that he has just been able to use his power again. Renia is happy that they no longer need to kiss to activate the magic, while Beldemir finds it strange. The man tries to use magic on the teapot to make sure that his power has truly returned. They both watch in surprise as the magic works without a kiss, and try to understand the reason for the changes. Beldemir ponders that his strength only manifests under certain conditions, but he can't pinpoint what those conditions are. He recalls the wedding moment, when the kiss was about wanting to protect Renia from the rain, and starts to sense the link between feelings and magic. Beldemir recalls using magic to revive withered flowers, bringing joy to Renia with their renewed beauty in life. He decides to now use his power for simple acts, like fetching water for the girl, to make her life easier. Regina drinks water with pleasure, marveling at how easily her desires are now fulfilled. She finds joy in simple things and thinks that perhaps happiness lies in these moments. Beldemer asks what spell Renaya would like to see right now, and the girl ponders the question thoughtfully. She suggests using magic to place the glass back on the table, testing Beldemer's abilities in the process. The man effortlessly fulfills her request, and the glass gently descends to the surface, sparkling in the light. Regina watches what's happening with admiration, understanding that their lives are now filled with little miracles. Rania, in her nightgown, suddenly hears a sound and turns, noticing the kettle being placed on the table, and is surprised by what's happening. The girl anxiously asks Beldemir if he understands the circumstances under which his magic works, and shares her theory. She explains that if her guess is correct, it changes everything, and she closely watches the man's reaction. Beldemir approaches unexpectedly, his hand touches Renia's face, and she freezes in anticipation. The man confesses he can only use magic to grant Renia's wishes, gazing into her eyes. Approximately 104 characters. It's morning in the Coriolano Guild, and someone asks Freya where she was last night, curious about her absence. The maid with red hair replies that she was returning home, and the butler Bals is surprised that she arrived so late. Freya snaps at Bals that he should attend to his master instead of following her, then storms off down the hallway. Bals reminisces about the young gentleman Edwin and smiles shyly as he thinks of him. Freya sharply corrects the butler, reminding him that Edwin is now married and should be addressed as Mr. Edwin, not young master. She demands Bals finally pull himself together, and he apologizes, overwhelmed by her pressure. Freya tells him to leave, as she needs to tidy up Lady Rinia's room, and Bals obediently departs. The maid asks to keep her late-night departure from Edwin a secret, and Bals happily agrees to this. The butler leaves, overwhelmed with emotions, while Freya thinks with irritation that he's acting like a fool. She cautiously enters Renia's room, glad that the hostess hasn't returned yet. Freya approaches the cabinet, wondering what happened to the statue. Feeling anxious and bewildered, Freya decides to leave Renia a fake stone instead of the real one, so as not to raise suspicion about its loss. She wonders if Renia has made a wish yet, holding two similar stones in her hands, and contemplating. The maid thinks it's unlikely that Renia wished to stop loving Edwin, but she still considers that possibility. Freya is satisfied with her plan, confidently smiling with the stone in hand, believing everything is under control. Regina firmly tells Annie that she needs to hurry with the divorce, and the maid asks in surprise. The girl admits she didn't expect anyone to see their beach wedding, and now she's worried about the consequences. In her thoughts, Renia recalls the moment with Beldemer and is certain that her wish must be fulfilled to free him. Annie cautiously asks if her father will give permission for the divorce, even if Edwin agrees. Renia replies with irony that her father will never give his consent, as his behavior at the wedding was too ostentatious. She thinks about what to do next, realizing the situation is getting tougher and needs determination. Annie surprised Renia's resolve to hide everything from her father. Renia assures her she can make it happen. Renia firmly asserts that she will achieve her goals by any means necessary, and the maid admires her determination. A scream sounds near the mansion as Renia calls her father to discuss something important. The man with a mustache reacts sharply to his daughter's words, and a thud is heard in the library. Father is outraged that Renia allowed Edwin to make an important decision and demands an explanation. The man explains that Edwin wanted to learn how to manage the guild, and Renia, in shock, asks if he gave his consent. The girl can't believe what she's hearing, while her father calmly confirms that he agreed to Edwin's request. Renia cries in despair, not understanding how her father could agree so easily, making the situation even more complicated. Renia furiously demands answers from her father, not understanding why he did this, and blames him for trusting Edwin. The man with a mustache calmly thinks that Edwin might be interested in the guild after the divorce request, and sees nothing strange in it. The girl tries to explain her view, but her father reminds her there are always extra ears at home, and asks her to be careful. The father unexpectedly admits that he gave Edwin the storage key 3 months ago, shocking Renia with this news. She's upset that only she and her father should have keys, and doesn't understand why the decision was made without her knowing. Renia cries out in despair that her father ruined everything and can't handle her emotions. The girl rushes out of the room, slamming the door, while the mustached man is left in confusion. Her father wonders how Renia reached that conclusion, sighing wearily as he watches her go. Regina glares irritably at the mansion, not understanding why getting a divorce is proving so difficult. In the room, Annie wonders what Edwin is plotting and suspects that he might be trying to destroy the guild, or still has feelings for Renia. The girl is sure that if Edwin has any feelings, they are only for the guild's money, not for her. Renaya comes to the conclusion that it is money, the reason why Edwin is postponing the divorce, and she feels upset. On the floor, she notices a scrap of paper and picks it up in surprise, remembering her plan. Annie asks what the paper is, and Renaya explains she left it between the shelves to see if Freya would find the stone. The girl realizes that Freya figured out the theft and now knows who took the stone. Renaya realizes her plan is exposed, and now she must act more carefully to avoid getting caught. Renaya opens the box and is surprised to see the stone is still there, while Annie wonders why it hasn't vanished. The maid asks if the stone shouldn't have disappeared after the wish was granted, examining it closely with curiosity. The girl explains that it's a fake she ordered and kept with the map to confuse Freya and lead her astray. Renaya reflects that if Freya didn't take the stone, it means she simply confirmed the theft, and she wonders about her motives. She asks Annie when Freya started working in the house, and the maid recalls that it was approximately 3 months ago. Renaya notes that it was then Freya infiltrated the family, and Edwin received the key to the vault. The girl is sure these events are not random, and begins to suspect a connection between them. Against the backdrop of the house, Renaya decides she must be especially careful to avoid new mistakes. Beldemir stands by the window, lost in thought, and Shapiro cautiously asks what he's pondering this morning. The man admits he thinks about Renea's wish, and his expression turns serious. He explains that until his wish is granted, he can only use magic for her own good, and he finds this rather peculiar. Beldemir notes that being tied to one desire for so long is wrong, and causes an internal protest within him. Shapiro shifts the conversation to magic and wonders what might be the cause of its instability. Beldemir agrees that the ceremony took place, and he and Renea are officially husband and wife. The man ponders what he must now be for Renea, the perfect husband, as he cannot afford to be anything less than flawless. In his mind, he envisions a confident and strong husband, ready to protect and support his wife at all costs. Shapiro notices that Beldemir has a thought he can't shake off, and he cautiously asks what that thought is about. The man admits that when he heard Renea's wish, he promised to be the perfect husband for her. Beldemir reflects that he can no longer afford to be anything less than perfect now that their union is officially sealed. He notes that being tied to one desire for so long feels wrong and stirs a sense of inner rebellion within him. At this time, in the Coriolano Guild's vault, an empty box is discovered, and Renea tries to figure out what was there before. The girl assumes that a precious stone lay inside the imprint, possibly serving as payment for a wish at the temple. Renea is building a theory that if she's right, Freya might have stolen the first stone precisely from the vault. Against a backdrop of decorations, an image of Freya with red hair appears, holding a stone, and it becomes clear she came to the house for this theft. Regina ponders how Freya even learned about the gemstone's existence and who could have told her about the family vault. The girl suspects that Edwin had the key and starts to connect the events together. In her mind, a thought arises. Freya and Edwin might have been in cahoots from the start. Renaya is stunned by this realization and can't believe she has been deceived all this time. Regina stands by the window, wondering if Edwin might have discovered the stone first and drawn Freya into his plan. The girl sighs wearily, admitting that her head is starting to hurt from these thoughts, when Annie mentions the visit from a stranger. The maid explains that the man came to talk about his research, and Renea immediately understands who it is. The girl concludes her thoughts, realizing that Beldemir used forbidden magic to demonstrate his power before vanishing without a trace. She is discussing this with Chase, who confirms that he had to put in a lot of effort and hard work to obtain this information. Regina is surprised that this is all they managed to find out and feels disappointed. Chase calmly replies that it took considerable effort to uncover this, and they both ponder their next steps. Renaya thoughtfully reflects on the meaning of forbidden magic and its link to the disappearance of Beldemir. She asks Chase what he thinks of this power's nature and listens closely to his answer. Chase explains that among wizards, there is a rule that everyone who studies the magical arts follows. He emphasizes that under no circumstances should one ever try to bring a person back from the dead. A flash of lightning and a thunderstorm recall ancient times when the voices of the gods could still be heard. Beldemir once sought to surpass all limits, striving to cross the boundary between mortals and gods, approximately 112 characters. He wonders, if the one who crosses this line, if they will become a true god, and his gaze, it becomes utterly obsessed. At this moment, Renea realizes that it was precisely Beldemir's ambition that became the cause of his curse and disappearance. Beldemir feels within himself a power capable of overcoming the limitations imposed by the gods on humanity and ponders its nature. He stands in the laboratory and Shapiro anxiously asks if he is sure that everything will turn out well. The man explains that raising the dead goes against the will of the gods, but he cannot back down. Beldomir justifies his actions with compassion for the boy's parents, whose loss keeps them in turmoil. He considers himself an outstanding mage, equal to the gods, and believes he can change fate. Beldomir begins the ritual, commanding the soul to return, and the magic circle flares with light. At this moment, energy fills the room, and magic spirals out of control, illuminating everything around. Beldomir realizes that his pursuit of perfection and compassion have led to a dangerous experiment, the consequences of which are unpredictable. Beldomir watches anxiously for the ritual's outcome, unsure if the magic has worked at all. He gazes at the boy lying there, confused, and wondering why nothing seems to be happening. Suddenly, the child's hand begins to move, and Beldomir is astonished by this sign of life. His eyes widen in disbelief. He can't believe the ritual could have worked. Beldomir exclaims, "Can it be that the boy can hear his voice?" and rushes towards the bed. The boy slowly sits down and quietly replies that he hears Beldomir. The mage is stunned, realizing he broke the ban, and retreats in fear. A sinister aura fills the room, and the boy, with a vacant stare, says that Beldomir dared to break the prohibition. Beldomir realizes with alarm that the voice he hears does not belong to the child he was trying to resurrect. He looks at the boy and feels that before him is something alien and dangerous. Inside, the mage realizes he's encountered something that shouldn't have returned to this world. Beldomir tries to understand if his ritual was successful and asks the question aloud. The creature replies that you could call it a success, and Beldomir laughs in bewilderment, not believing what's happening. He justifies his actions by pity for the boy's parents, explaining that he couldn't refuse their request. The creature asks if it's truly true, and Beldomir confirms he wanted to fulfill their sole wish, revealing his intentions clearly. The magician is surprised that his companion understands people's desires so well, pondering the consequences of his actions. An unknown voice tells Beldomir that fulfilling a couple more wishes will be no trouble at all for him. The man looks at his hands with surprise and anxiety, feeling a strange energy around him. The voice urges him to try, and the image of a mysterious man appears before Beldomir. Beldomir returns to his everyday life, his thoughts occupied with how to become the perfect husband for Rania. Shapiro brings him a stack of books he ordered for his studies and research. Beldomir notes that there are indeed many books and picks one up in his hands. Shapiro advises reading everything to the end to catch all the important details. Beldomir curiously opens a book with a bright cover titled How to Be an Excellent Husband, and decides to explore the advice to meet Rania's expectations. Beldomir reads books about family life and admits to Shapiro that he's just trying to keep his promise because he doesn't know how to be a good husband. On the table in front of him, there are several books with intriguing titles such as A Happy Wife, A Happy Destiny, Marriage for Dummies, To Love and Be Loved, and The Perfect Husband. He offers advice, noting that respect for one's wife and fidelity are the foundation of harmony, and agrees with these truths. Beldomir enthusiastically highlights particularly important points, considering them key to a happy marriage. He notes that the author presents many irrefutable arguments and continues to make observations. Among the advice, he emphasizes, be restrained, learn to cook, be gentle, avoid interacting with other women, and wake your wife with a soft kiss. Beldomir confidently decides he can be a great husband and mentally asks Rania to wait for the outcome as he prepares for change. In the evening, silence falls outside, and Beldomir feels ready for change for the sake of his beloved. Rania walks down the street, sensing someone is remembering her with unkind words. Her ears burn with anxiety. She notices that many people have gathered in the square and wonders why it's so crowded at this hour. In the crowd, they're discussing a strange object. Someone suggests it's the work of an unknown sculptor craving fame. The girl creeps closer, looking at what's happening with surprise, not understanding what has drawn so much attention. The spotlight falls on the statue, and Rania gazes in astonishment at its feet. She's stunned to recognize familiar features and can't believe her eyes. A buzz is growing in the crowd. People are discussing why this statue ended up right here. Regina panics, thinking something incredible is happening, and can't find an explanation for what's going on. Renya calls Shapiro in the night. Her voice, worried, echoes through the house, waking everyone. The girl rushes into the kitchen to Shapiro, breathing heavily, and says they have a huge problem on their hands. She recalls the central square with fear and tries to explain what happened there. Annie points the way, but Rania irritably replies that she isn't asking where the square is located. Shapiro calmly notes that Rania has already seen the statue, and the girl wonders how he knows this. The butler smiles and admits he installed the statue as a wedding gift for Rania and Beldomir, while the girl stares at it in shock. Rania, in a panic, informs Annie about the incident in the central square. Her voice is filled with anxiety and excitement. The maid calmly points the way, But Renaya irritably replies that she's not asking for directions to the square, but wants to tell them what happened. Bals calmly notes that Renia has already seen the master's statue, and the girl is surprised how he knows about it. The butler smiles as he admits that he set up the statue as a wedding gift for Renaya and Beldemar, considering it a great idea. Renia, confused, asks if it's normal for the statue to be in plain sight, and Bals assures her it's not a problem as long as Beldemir isn't locked inside. Shapiro dramatically calls everyone to praise Beldemir's name, while Renia watches his enthusiasm with confusion. The girl is left bewildered, not knowing how to explain to others why this statue is so important to her. Renya is surprised that Beldemir isn't bothered at all by the statue of himself erected in the central square. The girl asks if he's bothered by strangers looking at and touching the statue, but the man replies that he's used to people's attention. She worries that someone might recognize Beldemir if the statue is on display for everyone to see, and she feels anxious. Renaya decides that it's better to move the statue to another location to avoid unnecessary attention. The man takes her hand and asks if she's really that bothered by other people looking at the statue. The girl shyly replies that the reason isn't just that, and she blushes from his gaze. Beldemir assures Renia that only she can possess him, gently touching her face to dispel her worries, his words soothing her troubled heart. He's about to say something more, but suddenly shifts his posture, creating an air of effortless ease and relaxation. The man admits he hopes Renaya had a good day, then unexpectedly pulls her into a tight embrace. He looks into her eyes and asks how much longer they will live apart, longing to be closer together. Beldemir says that now that they are officially married, he doesn't mind Renia staying with him. The man suggests sleeping together in the same bed, and the girl reacts shyly to his words. In the evening, they lie next to each other, lost in their thoughts, and a warm but slightly awkward silence settles between them. Renia lies in bed and remembers that she has never slept in the same bed with Edwin. It feels strange and awkward to her. The girl can't fall asleep. Beldemir asks if she's sleeping, and simply wishes her a good night. She smiles and wishes him a good night in return, creating a warm atmosphere between them as they part ways. Beldemir recalls advice from a book that a good husband should wake his wife with a kiss each morning, and he makes a plan. In the morning, he wakes up first, determined to follow his plan and do everything right. At that moment, Renia suddenly wakes up, stretches, and says she feels well rested and refreshed. Beldemir remembers the kiss, but doesn't have time to do anything because Renaya is already awake. He is surprised by her energy, while the girl enthusiastically begins her new day, unaware of his intentions. Renya wakes up cheerfully and asks Beldemir if he slept well, explaining that she needs to get up early to get everything done. The man, annoyed, thinks he forgot her habit of waking up early, while the girl doesn't understand what he means. Renaya quickly gets ready and cheerfully tells him she'll be back later as she leaves the house. Beldemir stops her at the door to say goodbye and asks her to wait just a moment. He gently hugs Renia, wishing her a great day and asking her to come home a bit earlier. The girl feels shy from his care, but she smiles and agrees, promising to try her best. Renaya cheerfully says goodbye and runs off, while Beldemir calls Shapiro in surprise to discuss future plans. Shapiro appears beside him, and Beldemir admits that the kiss part has failed, so he suggests moving on to the next stage of his plan. Beldemir reflects that being a good husband turned out to be much harder than he expected. Renya runs down the path, surprised by Beldemir's change in behavior, wondering if it's connected to their recent wedding. She suggests that perhaps the man liked their first kiss so much that he started behaving differently. A memory of a passionate kiss surfaces in her imagination, and the girl shyly covers her mouth with her hand. Renia thinks that for Beldemir, it was his first kiss, but then she remembers that it was her first time too. She dismisses romantic thoughts, deciding that now isn't the time to dwell on feelings, as there's a lot to do. The girl gathers her strength to tackle all the tasks awaiting her on this busy day ahead. Renia smiles, admitting that living with two husbands is not just unusual, but also quite challenging. Regina orders servants to move Beldemir's statue inside. She asks Chase to keep searching for info on the mage's past. The girl hopes to see Beldemir earlier than usual today, and with this thought, she drinks tea in the living room. Freya, the red-haired maid, approaches her and says she wants to discuss an important matter with her. Freya pours the tea and invites Renaya to enjoy the drink, creating an atmosphere of trust between them. Renaya asks why Edwin makes Freya keep working in the house, despite the changes happening around them. The girl thinks that Freya didn't take the stone from the room because she either knew it was fake or doesn't need the real artifact yet. Freya admits with a smile that she herself asked to stay and work in this house, and wonders if Renia has fulfilled her wish or if all her efforts were in vain. Renaya clarifies that she is talking about her family, and the maid asks if she can be made a personal assistant if possible. The girl suspects that Freya has unfinished business and decides to keep her enemy close, staying alert for any signs. Renaya is surprised that Freya wants to serve her, and Freya assures her that her mistress is very dear and important. The girl admits that she thought Frey only cared about Edwin, but the maid says she values Renia more than anyone else. Regina thanks her for her loyalty, but notes that Annie is already her servant and suspects Freya wants to spy on her. Freya smiles and replies that she'll only agree over her dead body, and reluctantly accepts the refusal. Deep down, Renaya decides to be more cautious, because even a friendly maid might be hiding her true intentions. Freya asks Renia to let her know if she changes her mind, and the girl calmly agrees, continuing to drink her tea. Regina places the cup on the table and feels an inner tension after her conversation with the maid. She reflects that she used to think Freya was sweet, but now she's sure she's hiding her true nature. The girl suspects that Edwin either has no idea about the real Freya, or he simply accepts her just the way she is. Renaya realizes that a special bond has formed between Edwin and Freya, and this realization makes her feel a sense of unease. At this moment, Annie carefully turns to her hostess to discuss the matter of the statue. The maid reports that rumors are circulating in the city that the statue belongs to some lord who has his eye on it. Renaya is shocked to realize she can't transport the statue, and now must find a new solution to this pressing problem. Renaya feels overwhelmed among the crowd and struggles to find a solution to her pressing problem. She desperately ponders why the statue ended up in the greedy lord's hands and fears he'll find out about Beldamir. The girl realizes she can't just claim the statue as her own, as that would arouse suspicion. Internally, she blames her familiar for everything, believing it to be the cause of all her troubles. Shapiro notices Rania's strange behavior and watches her reaction with surprise. He cautiously asks if anything is wrong, but the girl remains silent, lost in her thoughts. Renaya finally asks where Beldamir is, and Shapiro replies with relief that he is glad about her interest. The butler informs that Beldamir is in the kitchen right now, and Renia decides to go there to talk to him. Renya enters the kitchen, catching a pleasant aroma, and calls out to Beldamir to find out what he's up to. She notices that there is a mist hanging in the room, and her gaze comes to rest on someone's bare back. The girl freezes, realizing the man in front of her is shirtless, and she gasps for breath. Beldamir turns around in his apron, surprised to note that Renia has returned earlier than he expected. Renya, flustered, asks where his shirt is, and Beldamir explains he didn't want to get it dirty. The girl can't hide her confusion, while Beldamir calmly continues cooking, seeing no problem with it. Regina hides her face in her hands, unsure how to react to such openness, and thinks she disagrees with his approach. Beldamir unexpectedly offers her a spoonful of soup, and Renia looks at him in surprise, not knowing what to do next. Beldamir offers a spoonful of soup to Renia, inviting her to try his first dish while watching her reaction closely. The girl flusteredly agrees, and cautiously tries the soup straight from the spoon the man is holding. The taste is unexpectedly pleasant, and Renia can't suppress a smile, feeling a slight flutter of excitement. Beldamir, with a racing heart, asks if she liked it, closely watching her facial expression for a response. Renaya joyfully admits that the soup is amazing, and her mood noticeably brightens as she speaks. The man smiles with relief, as this is his first solo culinary experience, and he was very worried about the outcome. Regina is surprised, because Shapiro usually does the cooking, and asks why Beldamir decided to cook the meal himself. Beldamir acknowledges that she is right, and explains that he wanted to do something special for his wife to make her happy. Beldamir admits that today he himself wanted to cook something for Renia, and she looks at him in surprise. He carefully feeds the girl from a spoon, trying to be the caring husband he promised to be. Beldamir reminds her that he wants to be a good husband, and Renia shyly agrees to this idea. The man asks if she wants more, and the girl replies that she wouldn't mind if he desires it too. Before continuing, Beldamir says he must first meet his wife properly, as tradition demands. At that moment, Shapiro bursts into the kitchen, admiring what's happening and rejoicing in the host's success. The butler tries the dish with delight and assures that nothing is impossible for Beldamir. Renaya explains to Shapiro that it's just a pot of stew, while the butler, thrilled, believes he has found himself in paradise. Shapiro enthusiastically assures that Beldamir can become a chef and his dishes will become world famous. Renaya notes to herself that the butler is unusually kind today and suspects that he has something planned. Shapiro, with a sly smile, deliberately interrupts them with Beldamir, irritating the girl. Renya, angry, realizes the butler is deliberately interrupting her time with her husband and decides not to give up. In the evening, in the room, sitting on the bed, Renaya and Beldamir discuss the events that took place in the guild. The man is wondering if the girl has encountered any difficulties at work or if it was particularly tough. Regina reflects that a good husband should ask his wife about her day and listen attentively. She notices that his words have made a strong impression on her and tries to find a response. The girl admits that one of the maids tried to steal a precious gem today and wonders if she should use this incident to learn more about the man. Renaya explains that we are talking about a red stone, the very one she used to make a wish, and it originally belonged to the guild. The girl explains that the stone disappeared after she made a wish, but the maid probably thought it was still somewhere in the house and tried to steal it. Upon hearing the question about the stone's name, Veldemir confesses that it was created from his blood. The man says that when he consumes this stone, he comes back to life, and his heart begins to beat again. The girl realizes that as long as Veldemir is in human form, no one can possess this stone. The man asks if Renée liked the blood-red sapphire, and she shyly admits that it is indeed beautiful. Veldemir gently touches her face, and a special moment forms between them in the air. The man gently touches the girl's face, and she freezes shyly, feeling the tension growing between them. Their lips slowly draw closer, and the air is filled with romance, brimming with tenderness and flowers. At the most unexpected moment, their near kiss is interrupted by the arrival of a third person, who greets them. The servant, with a smile, announces he's come to prepare the room for sleep, causing the couple confusion. He starts asking questions about the curtains and suggests a drink before bed, bustling around the room. Renya, in her fury, mentally calls him a scoundrel, not at all hiding her irritation at this sudden, unwelcome intervention. The man asks the girl with surprise and concern about creating a familiar, and she calmly replies that it's about the familiar of Veldemir. He, unable to hide his anxiety, asks her why she needs this, and at that moment, his hand trembles, spilling the tea. The girl, smiling with inner fire, explains that the meddler constantly interferes in her newlywed life, leaving the man overwhelmed by her intensity. In the morning, Veldemir gently wakes the girl, reminding her that it's time to go to work. The man, sitting beside her, gently urges her to wake up, sunlight flooding the room. Renea, finding herself in the embrace of a man, is surprised by his care, reflecting on the fact that this is what a good husband does. The girl, with a slight blush, ponders whether happiness in marriage must necessarily be simple. The man, not waiting for an answer, gently kisses her, as if wanting to dispel all her doubts. Their morning moment is suddenly interrupted by the energetic arrival of another person, who greets them joyfully. A young woman, filled with determination, vows to teach her unruly servant proper manners, no matter what it takes. Another guy asks in surprise if she is really married to Veldemir after hearing about her newlywed life. Renaya shyly tries to explain herself when asked if she is already married or not. The girl smiles and says she will soon be divorced, so that her ex won't interfere with her love life, and her companion curiously asks if she plans to marry Veldemir. The guy warns that getting rid of the familiar won't be easy, as a lot of magic has been invested in its creation. With a sly smile, Renea admits she just wants to teach her familiar a lesson. In the kitchen, the servant offers his help, but the man, busy with his work, refuses it. The man muses that if he managed to awaken Renea with a kiss, then becoming a good husband is only a matter of time. The servant, moved, assures him that the man is already the best husband, but he admits that he still has a lot to learn. The servant indignantly ponders why his master has fallen into the hands of a greedy woman, believing that his very existence makes him the ideal husband. In the kitchen, the girl joyfully calls Shapiro, and he, embarrassed and flustered, is pulled away from his thoughts. Shapiro, seething with indignation, hurries to carry out the assignment, unable to believe that such an insatiable woman has become his master's wife. In the evening, Shapiro runs out into the yard to find Lady Renea, who is busy raking leaves. He asks in confusion if this is really the best time for cleaning, while watching her busy with the task. Renea, not hearing his words, asks in surprise, continuing to sweep leaves in the quiet of the night. The girl with the mysterious smile asks you to come closer, hiding her true intentions. Shapiro, puzzled as to why such a young woman might have difficulty hearing, approaches her decisively. He moves forward cautiously, unaware of the trap ahead. A magic circle suddenly flares on the ground, capable of stealing the familiar's magic. Renya, with a sigh of regret, notes that he was just one tiny step away from falling right into her trap. She coldly admits she would have surely achieved her goal back then. Shapiro, in panic and surprise, asks where her conversation partner learned such magic, his face twisted with anxiety. Renya replies with a cold smile that it's none of his business. Maintaining her composure, she approaches the interlocutor and advises him to worry about something else. Their gazes meet in a tense atmosphere. Regina explains that Veldemar cannot use his powers without her, and if he were to suddenly lose his magic, no one would be able to help him. The young man, confused and hurt, asks what he did to deserve such treatment. his eyes filled with tears. Renaya, with a gentle smile, recalls that she couldn't fully enjoy her newlywed life because he simply wouldn't leave Veldemar's side, not even for a moment. Shapiro, in despair, makes excuses, insisting on his devotion to his master. While the girl turns away from him, she calmly notes that he's going too far with his actions. With a slight smile, the girl advises him to stop obsessing over Veldemir. She urges Shapiro to at least try living his own life once, and he is stunned by her words, absorbing them deeply. Shapiro thoughtfully repeats about his life, contemplating change for the first time. Later, he watches as the girl happily interacts with Veldemir, while he himself remains on the sidelines, lost in his thoughts. A loving couple kisses goodbye, while Shapiro watches in surprise at their affection. In his mind, a reminder echoes to reflect on his own life. As the couple looks at him in confusion, Shapiro, holding back his emotions, wishes them a great time and quickly walks away from them. The couple enjoys their kiss, while Shapiro finally realizes the hint they had been giving him. In a bright office, Edwin at his desk asks the girl to discuss an important matter. The girl, confused, remembers she's supposed to have dinner with Veldemir today and doesn't know what to do. A man suspiciously asks a girl about her activities, noticing that she has been going out often lately, and she responds nervously, denying it. Renaya hurriedly says goodbye, promising to meet for dinner, convincing herself that this is actually for the best. She ponders why the man seems so focused, and decides she must uncover the reason behind it. The girl recalls that he had been carefully reviewing the guild registry in recent days. Edwin bids farewell with a slight smile until dinner, returning to his papers. Suddenly, Renia bursts into the office, loudly declaring her hunger and suggesting that they should eat right now. Edwin is surprised to see that it's only 3 in the afternoon. The girl happily insists on an early dinner because she wants to try the tomato stew. At the table, he asks her if she doesn't like the food, watching as she pokes at her plate with a fork. Renia shyly admits she has no appetite, even though she recently complained of hunger, and the man is surprised by her mood swings. The girl explains she's full from cookies after lunch, and the man wonders when she had time to eat them. She asks to stop talking about food and reminds him they need to discuss something important. At the table, Edwin is surprised that the girl also has something to discuss and looks at her attentively. A tense silence hangs between them as they both remain silent, contemplating their words. Renya, gathering her resolve, asks why he was looking through the registry, since it had never interested him before. The man calmly explains that the Lord said a meeting about the guild, and he was checking the records to ensure everything is in order. The girl notes that he has never prepared so thoroughly for a meeting before, and the man admits he couldn't provide the Lord with the right answers. Edwin admits he now wants to be well prepared to answer any questions, and the girl understands his motives behind this. Renaya mentally struggles with having too many questions and too little time, while a vision of a boy with tomato stew flashes in her mind. The man calmly asks why she suddenly requested a divorce, and his expression turns serious as he listens intently. She tries to explain, but he insists her reasons are insufficient, creating a palpable tension between them. Edwin admits he doesn't understand her actions, especially since she recently gifted him a suit, which feels contradictory. Renaya, in confusion, recalls her actions and cannot understand what exactly she did. She realizes she doesn't remember anything after the traumatic events of her past life, and this causes her anxiety. Renya explains with a smile that giving gifts has become a habit for her, trying to hide her excitement. Edwin thoughtfully asks if she has another reason for her actions and choices. In the silence of the lavish room, he wonders if she's hiding something important. She understands that even if someone knows something, she still has to pretend ignorance, hiding her fatigue behind a polite mask. Inside, she admits that the difference between her and Edwin is vast. He's an aristocrat, and she's just a commoner, and even his betrayal doesn't seem as significant to her as her own marriage to Veldemir. Despite the unfairness of it all, she has no other choice, and she clenches her fist, wondering if 3 years is not too long to be tired of this union. She smiles gently, noting that even a marriage built on love can fall apart over the course of time. Edwin looks at her in surprise when she confesses she's tired of their marriage. Regina says that this is the only reason she's asking for a divorce, and her decision echoes in the vast emptiness between them. A real feast is laid out on the table, sparkling with appetizing dishes and fresh vegetables. The girl looks at the treat with delight, happy at the sight of it. Even though she usually ate little at dinner with Edwin, she realizes she can't eat another bite, as her stomach is about to burst from all the overeating she's done. Veldemir notices her unusual state, and, feeling a sense of concern, asks her if something has happened today. She hastily makes excuses, explaining her fatigue by saying she rushed home as fast as she could. The guy with a smile realizes she rushed to try his signature tomato stew, eager for a taste of his cooking. At the table, the guy notices that Renia is truly enjoying her meal, and she smiles in agreement with this. She decides to eat a bit more to avoid suspicion, mentally pleading with her stomach to hold on just a little longer. Regina struggles to continue eating, marveling at the taste, while the guy watches her reaction with interest. New dishes are brought to the table, and the guy assures her she'll like them too. Regia freezes in amazement, realizing that there's more and more food. Beldemir looks at her in surprise, and her stomach finally gives in, as if ascending to heaven from overeating. The guy looks at Renea in confusion, not understanding what's happening. Rena is suddenly nauseous, and she hurries to the bathroom, leaving him alone at the table with the desserts. He's thinking the food isn't spoiled, because when he tasted it himself, it was perfectly fine. The thought that it's impossible doesn't let him rest, because the dishes were prepared by him, the great Veldemir. He is overcome with disappointment and anger, as he begins to suspect that Renea was only pretending to like his cooking. Shapiro approaches him and asks with concern if everything is all right, while he struggles to hide his emotions. Veldemir, tormented by doubts, asks about Renea's condition and painfully assumes that she will no longer want to try his food, while Shapiro is surprised by his words. Shapiro explains that Lady Renea has only a stomach upset, nothing more serious. Lying in bed, Renea thinks with relief that she was afraid she wouldn't survive the night. She thinks that Veldemir is probably quite surprised, as his food is truly very delicious and enjoyable. Veldemir enters the room, and Renea, noticing him, quickly sits up on the bed, feeling flustered. He anxiously wonders if she feels so uncomfortable dining with him, and she shyly denies it, feeling embarrassed. Renea smiles and explains that she ate too quickly because she was very hungry after a whole day without food, and dinner with Edwin felt uncomfortable for her. Veldemir wonders why the guild isn't feeding her, and she admits that she skipped lunch for his tomato stew to make sure she had room for it. She starts to worry that now Veldemir might begin to doubt her words and intentions. He seriously says he hopes she won't act like that again, and she asks in surprise for clarification. Veldemir explains that she really shouldn't skip her meals just for his food, because, she can always eat later if she happens to come home already full. He admits that what upsets him more is not that she doesn't eat his dishes, but that she starves herself. She wonders why he's stroking her stomach, and he calmly explains that it helps reduce the pain. He asks for permission to continue, assuring that his hands are bigger and more effective. Renea remembers that he usually doesn't like to touch people, even though they have already shared many kisses. He admits that's usually the case, but with her, it's different. Renea is surprised that things are different for him and feels the atmosphere between them change. He contemplates whether this is connected to his desire, but believes the reason lies in something greater. Beldemir looks at her with tenderness, admitting to himself that he feels not the slightest disgust in her presence. On the contrary, his feelings only intensify, and overcoming his inner barriers, he leans in to kiss her, filling the room with a thrilling excitement that electrifies the air. The girl rushes down the stairs, indignantly accusing Shapiro of not waking her up when he should have. She glares at Shapiro, warning him that she won't tolerate any disruption to her newlywed life, while he reminds her of her earlier words about not interfering in morning matters. The girl grabs Shapiro by the collar, proving they are completely different things, and he, confused, doesn't understand the difference. A man appears on the stairs, offering to escort Renea, while their argument continues below. The man is surprised that Renea is late as she rushes away from him. He watches her leave, contemplating just how challenging it can be to be a good husband. Renea rushes through the yard, clenching her fists and hurrying, knowing that it's not so simple. She is returning home with her purchases, reflecting that the trip to the city center was a wise decision. Remembering her habits, she despairingly realizes that she has bought a suit for Edwin again. Calming herself, she notes that at least she didn't forget about Veldemir. The maid, with a smile, asks where Lady Renea went this morning. With a hint of irony, the maid observes that her mistress seems to have gone out to buy clothes for Mr. Edwin. Renea, with a strained smile, confirms she bought an item from the latest collection, mentally surprised by her encounter with Freya. Freya notices that Renea always buys suits for Edwin, and suspects that she still loves him, despite the talks of divorce. But Renea insists that the divorce is still on. Renea explains that these are just items she ordered in advance and was only able to pick up today. Freya smiles at the explanation, while Renea looks at her with slight annoyance. In her thoughts, Freya recalls thinking Renea was madly in love with Edwin, picturing them together. However, observing Renea's behavior, Freya begins to doubt and thinks she may not really want a divorce after all. Renea admits to herself that she wants to ask Freya an important question. She can't risk it because of her difficult relationship with Veldemir. Renea hands a bag of clothes to Freya, asking her to pass it to Edwin. Freya is surprised and suggests that Renea give the gift herself. Freya assures that Edwin would be happy to receive a gift from Renea. Renea is leaving, and Freya promises to tell Edwin that it's a gift from her, and Renea thanks her with tears in her eyes. Renea wearily turns away, feeling how everything happening is draining her energy. Freya thoughtfully watches the scene unfold, lost deep in her own thoughts. Later, in the bedroom, the maid notices with surprise the changes in Renea's appearance. Renea looks exhausted, and the maid asks with concern about her well-being and health. Renea complains irritably that the constant worries are taking a toll on her well-being. The maid asks about the contents of the bag, and Renea explains she bought clothes for Veldemar while choosing things for Edwin. Edwin tenderly thanks Renea for the gift, marveling at her thoughtfulness. Shapiro happily opens the package, confident he'll be delighted with what's inside. Soon, to his surprise, he discovers something unusual inside. Shapiro holds two identical pairs of pants in his hands, puzzled about the purchase. Edwin notices Renea's confusion and asks if there has been some kind of mistake. Renea flusters as she tries to explain the situation, stunned by her own blunder. In the store, Renea confidently orders two identical suits, explaining it away as her husband's carelessness with clothes. In an awkward situation, she explains that the second pair of pants came as a gift with the first purchase. She smiles and insists that she couldn't pass up such a benefit. After all, two pairs are better than one, and Edwin agrees. Renea is relieved and happy that the crisis is over, expecting her husband's agreement. Suddenly, she's horrified by the thought that another bag might also have two pairs of pants. Unable to withstand the pressure, Renea loses consciousness right in Edwin's arms. Renea, feeling utterly exhausted, can barely keep herself upright, and the man gently supports her with a caring touch as she reflects on how she might have pushed herself too hard today. The man gently embraces Renea and leads her upstairs to help her get ready for bed, while another young man watches them, holding a pair of pants in his hands. Renea, almost falling asleep, agrees to the proposal to make the purchase, trusting Edwin with it. The young man looks at Edwin with surprise, while Renea and her companion stop to watch him closely. Edwin turns to Renea, and she looks at him with fear and surprise, not expecting such attention from him. A cold wariness appears in Edwin's eyes as he tries to understand who is standing before him. The maid stands in front of the table, deep in thought, reflecting on the fact that Lady Renea has never made such mistakes before. There are two identical shirts on the table, which is surprising. The girl thoughtfully tries to understand why the lady might have done that. In the living room, a few people gather, and one of them asks about someone named Edwin. Shapiro notes that the name Edwin sounds masculine, which raises even more questions, and also claims that Lady Renea is clearly familiar with this person, as she often mentions his name. The girl indignantly denies hints of a special relationship, claiming her connection with Edwin is purely professional. She suddenly realizes the mistake, pointing at Shapiro and explaining the confusion by his physical resemblance. Shapiro looks at her with disbelief, making it clear that her excuses don't sound convincing. He smugly declares that an ordinary person simply cannot compare to an ideal like himself. Shapiro continues to praise himself, claiming he is unique and one of a kind. The girl, making excuses, explains that she got confused because Edwin and Shapiro had the same hair and clothes. The guys come to an agreement that everything happening now seems logical, as no one can compare to the perfect creation. Renya is experiencing inner turmoil, not knowing how much longer she can endure living between two homes. The next day, the sky is overcast with clouds, signaling a change. In the room, the man notices the gloomy weather and suggests that it will rain soon, while the girl is happy that she woke up early. She's curious what Veldemar is looking at, and he replies that he's just watching the street. Regina, by the window with the man, thoughtfully asks about his plans for the day. The man is surprised she's asking about his plans for the first time. He calmly replies that he plans to read and do research, just like he always does. For the girl, it was always a relief to know that Veldemar wouldn't leave home. She notices he spends his days staring out the window, as if waiting for her to return. Inside, she admits that she once dreamed of him as a husband, but now she feels she is neglecting him. The young woman sadly thinks of herself as a bad wife, while the man worriedly asks if she's all right. The young woman decides that if Voldemort is trying to be a good husband, she must also make an effort to be worthy of him. She asks Veldemar about his favorite flower with curiosity, and he admits that he has never thought about it. For Veldemar, What matters most is whether the flower helps his magic, not his personal likes. Veldemar unexpectedly asks which flower Renea likes the most, and she is surprised by the question. Renea calls the rose her favorite flower, and Weldemar agrees that now he likes it more than others too. He confesses that he likes everything she likes and gently touches her face. 86 characters. Renea realizes with surprise that Veldemar meant crafting tender phrases when he spoke of research. 109 characters. Veldemar rejoices that his efforts and studies have truly borne fruit. Approximately 75 characters. He resolves to strive even harder to become better for his beloved and tenderly kisses her. Approximately 98 characters. At the same time, Colin's guild has a business atmosphere. One of the guild members notes that the registry turned out to be much more detailed than he expected. Despite the fact that all the documents are in order, he still has doubts. Over breakfast, the girl thoughtfully ponders why Renea decided to file for divorce right now. A man sits in the darkness, unable to find any reasonable explanation for her actions. Memories bring him back to a recent moment when Renea joyfully gifted him clothes from the new collection. He anxiously concludes that something is clearly going on with her. Suddenly, a suspicion washes over him that Renea might be involved in some mysterious affair. Meanwhile, Renea herself, surrounded by flowers, confidently decides that under no circumstances will she be able to act otherwise. A man with cold determination makes the decision to agree to the divorce. A girl in a burgundy dress stands in the garden, thoughtfully crossing her arms, and a young man appears beside her, watching her with concern. The guy notices the girl looks upset, and she lowers her head, not hiding her disappointment at all. She explains that due to the heavy rains last week, none of the newly planted flowers have bloomed at all. Renea reflects on her efforts and contemplates why she has to work so hard, while others discuss the sweetness of a life devoted to their master. The young man tries to comfort her, assuring her that the flowers will definitely bloom next year. She admits that she wanted him to be able to admire the beautiful flowers. Renya Beldemary stands in the garden. She admits she wanted him to look at something interesting, not just out the window. The guy asks, surprised, if she really planted the flowers for him, and the girl shyly admits it. Approximately 110 characters. Hiding her face in her hair, she says she wanted to do something nice for him, since he always cares for her. Approximately 118 characters. Beldemar fondly thinks about how kind and caring his wife truly is and always will be. The young man, with a smile, reminds her that she has a husband who can fulfill her desires. He enthusiastically offers to show her the blooming roses, filling the girl with surprise and joy. Renaya realizes something important with surprise. Her eyes wide open in awe, she happily agrees and eagerly expresses her desire to see the roses in bloom, while the young man calmly acknowledges her wish. Together, they find themselves among lush pink bushes, savoring this enchanting moment in the garden. Beldemar confidently believes he can fulfill any of her wishes, while the girl gazes in admiration at the blooming rose in front of her. A young man with a gentle smile remarks on the beauty of the roses, holding one of the flowers in his hand. His heart fills with gratitude, and he quietly expresses his feelings for her. Among the blooming roses, the girl suddenly reaches for the young man and gently kisses him, holding tightly onto his shirt. The guy is stunned, while the girl shyly looks away, realizing her impulsive act. Renea tries to justify herself, claiming the roses are too beautiful, and she couldn't resist. The girl, with a bewildered smile, explains that the scent of roses has gone to her head. Beldemir recalls promising to grant her any wish, now feeling quite embarrassed by his earlier confidence. Renea, lowering her head, asks for forgiveness for her sudden outburst. The girl feels a gentle touch on her face, surprised and slightly embarrassed by it. The young man holds her close, reassuring her that she has nothing to apologize for. He reminds her that he is her husband, and he wonders why she is so upset about the kiss. Both feel awkwardness, but tenderness and excitement hang between them. The guy suddenly reminds her it's time for work, and she thinks with annoyance that a good husband shouldn't distract his wife now. Renya is frustrated by the early workday, hurrying to the guild with her husband. The girl considers asking to adjust her work hours to fulfill Renea's wish, weighing the request carefully. The young man finds the idea amusing, as the whole situation strikes him as unexpectedly lighthearted and fun. Inside the house, Renea walks forward in a cheerful mood, but a wary maid watches her, suspecting something is amiss. The maid wonders why 2 identical shirts were bought, and notes that the mistress never returned them to Edwin. Renea, oblivious to the suspicion, continues on joyfully, not thinking about the forgotten shirts. The maid concludes there can only be 2 reasons. Either her mistress was distracted by something, or she's planning something unusual. The maid stands in the hallway, her arms crossed thoughtfully, pondering whether the mistress might be indifferent to whether Edwin receives the things she bought for him. A look of determination appears in her eyes. If everything is tied to her owner's wish, she plans to uncover the truth. A young man in a black suit smiles, slightly embarrassed by this unexpected encounter. He apologizes for frightening the maid and informs her that Mr. Edwin wishes to have dinner with her. The young woman, citing a pain in her stomach, declines dinner, quickly making her way out. With a gentle smile, she asks to convey to Edwin that she regrets and hopes her request will be fulfilled. The young man enthusiastically offers his help, kindly inquiring if the girl has taken her medicine, but she politely declines, wishing to be left alone. The girl, hiding her true intentions, explains her desire to be alone by saying that she plans to keep an eye on Renea. Thoughts of Renea's actual involvement flash through my mind as my hand slowly stirs my drink with a spoon. A young man anxiously reports that the kingdom may soon face a terrible disaster ahead. Marquis Sharon, former commander of the First Prince's Knights, notes that the Second Prince has been acting suspiciously lately. In a room filled with soft light, the interlocutors discuss the possibility of a rebellion by the Second Prince. The Marquis's expression turns serious as he recalls his oath of loyalty to the First Prince. In tense silence, a question arises. Are you ready to prove your loyalty to the First Prince again, if the chance comes? A drop of sweat appears on the young man's face as he nervously confirms his readiness to follow the order. At this time, it becomes clear that someone is smuggling weapons and secretly sending them to the Second Prince. In the room, they're discussing that the Coriolano Guild might be involved, and the speakers reach this conclusion. The Marquis asks to find proof of gold and weapon transactions between the guild and the capital to crush the uprising at the start. In the magical glow of the bowl, a question about trust in Zavin's important task arises. Even if evidence is found implicating the guild, the Marquis, you see, he has promised to ensure the safety of Zavin's wife and his loved ones. The evening light fills the room, where a man ponders that if Renea is truly working with the Second Prince, then her request for a divorce is merely an attempt to stop him from exposing the guild's involvement. Through the window, he notices a familiar figure on the street, which surprises him. A girl with fiery hair appears among the passers-by, and the man recognizes her as Freya. It surprises him that she was recently complaining about feeling unwell, and now she's rushing somewhere on business. At night, he walks through the streets of the city, following her trail, thinking that she headed this way. A sense of unease grows within him, as he suspects something might have happened to her family. Beneath the hood, a girl with a serious gaze is hidden, and it becomes clear that this is not Renea. In the quiet of the night, the house welcomes Renea, bathed in the soft glow of its windows. On the stairs of the house, two people meet, and a warm, joyful exchange of glances occurs between them. The man, with a smile, declares he won't let his wife waste a single minute, and the woman joyfully responds to his care. Shapiro, holding the books, notes with a touch of envy that Renea has become even more beautiful and hurries off to prepare for dinner. The lovers find themselves alone, and the man decides to greet his wife in the only right way, filling the moment with tenderness. In gentle bliss, the heroine dreams of the future, imagining how her wish will come true after her divorce from Yavin. Regina reflects that she'll be completely alone, as she doesn't plan to marry again, and at that moment, their lips meet in a kiss. For her, this is the last chance for an unforgettable honeymoon, and she's savoring every moment of their intimacy. Refusing to miss a single emotion, she passionately returns his kiss, surprising her companion. Embarrassed, he admits her talent for kissing, and she playfully asks for his opinion on the matter. Beldemers, with a smile, offers to share dinner, kindly inviting her to spend the evening together. Renya laughs with all her heart, and the man watches her joy with a slight embarrassment. She explains that she's just very happy in this moment. A servant interrupts their privacy on the stairs, inviting them to eat before the food gets cold. Suddenly, Beldemer becomes alert, sensing the presence of an unfamiliar stranger nearby. Someone appears at the door, causing alarm for everyone inside the house. The servant insists the door was locked and suggests the stranger got in over the fence, prompting everyone to find out who it is. The man shields Renea, striving to protect her, while alarm is mirrored in her eyes. 98 characters. The servant nervously grabs the doorknob, ready to open the door for the uninvited guest. The homeowner peeks out cautiously, trying to figure out who's arrived in the night. A stranger appears at the door, apologizing for the intrusion, and the tension in the air grows. He declares that he has come here for one person, and Renea, overcome with anxiety, recognizes his voice. The stranger explains that he saw his wife enter this house, and now he demands an explanation. Edwin confidently claims that he saw his wife enter this house, while the others look at him in confusion. The homeowner tries to convince the guest they're mistaken, but suddenly notices something unusual. All attention turns to the girl in the red dress, and it becomes clear she is the wife they are searching for. In the tense silence, the man slowly turns, realizing that Renea is truly standing right in front of him. In the thick shadows of the garden, a girl with fiery red hair watches through the leaves, her gaze full of hidden intrigue. She walks down the stone steps with disappointment, thinking about how she expected to find something magical, like a statue that grants wishes. Realizing the truth, she gazes into the distance with cold determination, understanding it was all about a lover. Despite her disappointment, the situation still seems intriguing to her, as she believed Renea was only loyal to Edwin, and now she's learning about another man. Her thoughts flicker, with the admission that perhaps her rival isn't so foolish. At this time, a tense conversation unfolds in the room among several people, with a question about the wife, and the atmosphere heats up. A woman in a red dress, with blood on her lips and a tense expression, finds herself the center of attention as fingers point at her. A young man with a cold gaze introduces himself as Edwin Lefort, surprising everyone present in the room. A tense atmosphere fills the room as one of the men notices that someone seems familiar to him, while the woman lowers her head in embarrassment. Those present discuss that they've only heard of Edwin, who works with Lady Renea at the guild, while the woman in despair ponders what to do. The man, with a smile, reports that there's no one in the guild with that name, deepening the confusion. Beldermer asserts that his wife, the daughter of the guild owner, could not work there, while the woman anxiously clings to his hand. A man with dark hair suspiciously questions the girl's background, calling her the daughter of the guild owner. Shapiro is confused and bewildered, not understanding what's being discussed. Among the blooming bushes, two men are discussing how remarkably similar their clothes are. In the dimly lit room, a man explains that his wife buys him clothes, while the woman in red hurries away down the stairs. In the tense atmosphere, all eyes are fixed upon the young woman named Renea, who, in her distress, lowers her head. A dark-haired woman, frowning and pressing her hand to her forehead, asks a question about the duration of the marriage. Edwin, as he leaves, confirms they've been married for 3 years, surprising those around him. He repeats this phrase with anguish, and the blonde girl rushes to him in distress. One of the guests, feeling that his presence was inappropriate, hurriedly leaves the room, leaving the others in confusion. Renea, in her burgundy dress, anxiously and tensely, promises herself that this conversation is far from over. On a night street, she catches up to a man, calling him and not letting him go. Turning to her, the man bitterly confesses that he couldn't have imagined her betrayal even in his wildest dreams. With a trembling voice and reproach, Renea recalls that she too was cheated on with another woman named Freya. Edwin wearily protests, assuring her that she is mistaken, while the girl insists on acknowledging his affair. He calmly notes that now is neither the time nor the place for arguments, hinting that her attention is needed elsewhere. A desperate girl calls out to a man who suddenly disappears, leaving her bewildered in front of the house. She rushes after him, shouting his name, but he doesn't turn around. Edwin, left alone, gazes into the distance with a slight smile, lost in his thoughts. Shapiro, with a cold expression, suspiciously clarifies his interlocutor's name. In a small room, 3 people discuss whether the guild truly belongs to the girl's father, and she weakly confirms it. The young man, with a weary sigh, recalls how he was advised to live his own life, suspecting all along that it was all part of a plan to keep a secret. Renea offers an awkward smile, explaining that she was constantly interrupted during their honeymoon. In response, her interlocutor, with a frightening smile and suppressed fury, repeats her words about the honeymoon. Renea, head bowed and regretful, confesses that she didn't want to lie and was planning to file for divorce. Beldermer, with dark hair, lies in the shade, covering his eyes with his hand, silently asking her to believe him. He reflects on being the girl's second husband and struggles to shake off a feeling of confusion and doubt. A sense of uncertainty grows in his soul. Is he really just a replacement for her former lover? Renea, trying to lighten the mood, excitedly shares that she has some good news to reveal. With a joyful smile, she declares her wish will come true as soon as she gets divorced. The man lowers his head with sadness and informs that her wish has not been fulfilled. Beldermer, with a cold half-smile, reflects on the fact that for her, he has always been just a lover, not a husband. His thoughts fall into place, because from the very beginning, he felt something was off with Lady Renea. The girl, with her head bowed, repeats to herself that her wish will come true as soon as she gets divorced. Beldermer, covering her face with her hand, says she no longer needs to try to be a good wife, and her name echoes in the silence. Renea, with a confused look, admits that she doesn't want to see him right now. The man sadly advises her to return to her husband. Renea, in a burgundy dress, anxiously turns to the man sitting on the bed, and a tense silence fills the room around them. Hearing the unexpected request to leave, she freezes in shock and confusion, unable to grasp what is happening right away. A majestic building rises above the city, and within its walls, a plea for divorce is heard. At the long table, amidst books and tea, a man refuses a woman's request for a divorce, not wanting to split up, and she, surprised, asks why. Renea nervously reminds him that she's ready to pay for his sister's wedding, no matter what. Edwin, hiding behind his cup, hears his name spoken with a tone of reproach. Surrounded by flowers, he reflects on how he always dreamed of divorce, but could never bring it up, as he was practically sold into this marriage. Finally achieving what he desired, he feels inexplicably empty and begins questioning the new man in the woman's life, lost in his thoughts. Against a backdrop of sunflowers, one woman anxiously watches another, who stubbornly shields herself from interference. Edwin ponders the fickleness of the heart and wonders how well a woman truly knows another person. At the table, a man suspiciously asks what his opponent is up to, while a woman is surprised by his sudden interest. Edwin notes to himself the stranger's attractiveness and abilities, which he hadn't encountered in this city before. He wonders if this man has seduced Renea, while the woman explains that he is studying and conducting research. The man concludes that his opponent does not have a steady job and assumes that he thinks of the woman as a guild associate. Renea tiredly pinches the bridge of her nose, feeling irritated by the drawn-out conversation and constant questions. In a spacious study, at a desk, two people are discussing how someone contacted her, mistakenly believing she worked for the guild. The man anxiously wonders if this person is one of the second prince's henchmen, causing him great concern. He abruptly stands up from the table, insisting he cannot agree to a divorce, while the woman, confused, demands an explanation, as there's no love between them. Renea, in despair, asks the man to think it over again, but he leaves, unwilling to listen to her pleas. Edwin firmly resolves that he cannot divorce her until the investigation is fully concluded, despite her persistent insistence on ending their marriage. The woman panics as she realizes that the court case could lead to a prison sentence for her due to polygamy. As the man leaves the room, he thinks the new acquaintance is not right for the woman and advises her to stay away from him. Renea, confused, asks about Freya, not understanding the conversation's direction. Left alone by the closed door, she sinks into silent contemplation and thought. In another place, a man with long blonde hair burns books in the fireplace, lamenting the fate of his master, who has become entangled with a treacherous woman. A woman with a smile enters a room where a fire is burning, causing surprise and indignation among those present. Shapiro, with long light hair, decides that he must report to the gentleman about the visit, but hesitates. He reminds her that polygamy is forbidden by royal decree and that one can be imprisoned for 10 years for it, startling his interlocutor. The woman, in a panic, asks if he plans to report her to someone. The man confirms his intentions, stating that if she doesn't rush the divorce, he will present his condition. Renea, with a strained smile, admits that for the gentleman, breaking the seal and fulfilling her wish is paramount. Against the backdrop of a blazing fire, she's told she's very lucky in her current situation. Renea sits by the man's bed, anxiously asking how he is feeling right now. Beldemers acknowledges with pain that he cannot be all right, lowering his gaze. He remembers how his first kiss was taken from him by deception and reflects on how he has lived a long life to have experienced such horror. Renea says with sympathy that she truly feels sorry for him, clenching her fist with worry. The man, thoughtfully gazing at his companion, asks if her marriage was arranged for practical reasons. The woman sadly admits that her father wanted to make her a noblewoman, and that's why she agreed to this union. Renea explains that Edwin's family was in debt, and he only married her on the condition that her father would pay off his family's loan. Beldemer notices that she has indeed become a noblewoman, and realizes that the relationship between the spouses was far from ideal. He ponders that if that's the case, then Renea made a wish, because she actually fell in love with him. The man asks in surprise if she's divorcing because of him, and Renea is lost for an answer. She shyly admits that everything happened only because he took her first wish too literally, fulfilling it word for word. Remembering the past, the girl admits she was touched by his tender attitude towards her. Renea confesses to the man that she's divorcing him because of him, and he's stunned by her words. She hopefully asks to wait a little, hiding her inner turmoil behind a smile. Left alone, the woman is tormented by doubts and doesn't know how to convince Edwin. Outside, an arrest scene is unfolding, with one of the men desperately resisting the guards. Among the detainees, a woman recognizes her father with horror in one of them. Renea, in a long dress, runs down the path, spotting a group of people ahead and exclaiming with excitement. She bursts into the room with anxiety, where the guards are leading a man, and her face shows fear and confusion. One of the guards warns not to come closer, while the man rushes towards the girl to protect her. The man turns around and assures the girl that everything is fine, and there's no need to worry. He entrusts the care of the girl and the guild to another man, and leaves himself, accompanied by guards. Renea stares after them, bewildered, not understanding what's happening or why everything has changed so suddenly. The girl, in despair, grabs the man, demanding explanations, and learns that her father is being accused of tax evasion. She repeats the accusation, stunned, not believing what she's heard. The man bitterly reflects that the Lord couldn't have done this after all the money they gave him. He asks the girl to visit the Lord to try and make sense of the situation. The man is convinced that if she goes with Edwin, she can reach the Lord, but the girl is surprised by this suggestion. At that moment, in the library, a man is asking the maid why she had been watching Renea so closely. The maid decides she needs to dispel her interlocutor's doubts, as she can't let him become her enemy, and explains how she saw Lady Renea enter through the back door several times in the morning. The man recalls that the very next day, Renea had asked her to deliver a gift to him, which turned out to contain 2 identical shirts. The maid reasoned that this should be enough to satisfy his curiosity, as her interlocutor was persistent, and she herself preferred to be safe, although soon Renea returned and took the shirts, citing a mistake. She admits she shouldn't have acted that way, but she couldn't ignore her suspicions, and the man clarifies that's precisely why she decided to follow Renea. The man asks what she hoped to achieve with her actions. The maid confesses with agitation that she only wanted to be useful to Master Edwin. The maid, covering her face with her hands, apologizes for not revealing everything sooner, while the man tries to explain. The man apologizes for his harsh tone, and the maid feels relieved that the situation resolved so easily. Suddenly, a tense atmosphere fills the room, and someone calls out to Edwin. Renea, head down, asks if he was the one who reported her father. The man asks the maid to leave them alone, and she nervously agrees to his request. The girl firmly demands the truth from Edwin, entering the room with a determined gaze. Renea leans over the table indignantly, accusing her interlocutor of looking at the registry. The young man calmly replies, "You see that it wasn't him, and, well, no evidence of tax evasion was found in the registry." A thought crosses her mind that her father might have given a fake registry. Edwin admits that he himself finds it difficult to understand what's going on. The girl asks him to go with her to the Lord to try to plead for her father's pardon. He explains that the amount of unpaid taxes was very large, while the girl insists that they can either pay it off or at least promise to do so. Edwin says that unpaid taxes will have to be reimbursed, because it's as natural as paying for your mistakes. Renea clenches her fist tightly and asks herself whether her father truly deserves to be imprisoned. He's trying to make excuses, but she demands to know who benefited from this whole situation. Renea, filled with despair, asks whether all of this happened because of unpaid taxes. The young man asks in surprise if she's hinting at him, and she confidently replies that she's right. She accuses him of receiving his title and becoming part of her family in exchange for everything that happened. The girl asks bitterly why he married her if he despised her father so much. 83 characters. Edwin exclaims he could have been a hired hand instead, but then remembers his mother. 102 characters. He admits that he didn't want to work for anyone out of pride. While the girl holds back her tears, the girl is accusing him of pretending to be innocent and righteous all along. Edwin understands that he's been accepting all the money he needed without question. Renea, as she leaves, notices that this behavior seems rather cowardly to her. A young man, holding his head in his hands, struggles with the recent conversation. The girl walks silently down the corridor, tears flowing. Meanwhile, a worried maid hurries to her with a question about her well-being. Renea, barely holding back her emotions, says that if Edwin doesn't want to go with her, she'll go to the Lord alone. At this time, Beldemer reflects on his unworthy wife, not hiding his sadness. He remembers how the girl would go out into the garden, her face lit by a smile. Beldemer, lowering his head and pressing his hand to his forehead, bitterly realizes that he is truly ill. Against the backdrop of the sunset sky, a majestic building rises, and a sense of inevitable change hangs in the air. With her head bowed, Renea slowly walks towards the carriage, lost in heavy thoughts about someone's lack of restraint. She leans wearily against the door, thinking about the constant attempts to get a bribe. Sitting in the carriage, the girl thoughtfully wonders why her father didn't pay his taxes. After all her efforts to make him a good man, she feels disappointment and exhaustion weighing her down. Suddenly, she notices the carriage is not heading home, and a wave of anxiety grips her heart tightly. Renea looks out the carriage window in surprise, realizing what's happening under the moonlight. The carriage speeds down the night road through the trees, and she knows she's been kidnapped. She calmly reflects on the situation, acknowledging that this is not new to her, and it's happening again right now. A realization flashes through her mind. She's the perfect target, coming from a wealthy family, yet remaining so down to earth. Memories drag her back to childhood, age 5, when threats and fear first haunted her. Approximately 90 characters. At 11, she relives it, hands clapped over ears, trembling under the same storm of shouts and menace. Approximately 112 characters. At 15, she faces a threat once again, but she meets it with remarkable calmness and audacity. Renea, with a slight weariness, reflects on what's happening, finding it all rather boring for her age. The coachman notes the the bumpy road, unaware of the changes that are approaching. He delights in his fortune, believing today's catch to be especially valuable. Suddenly, the girl resolutely jumps out of the carriage, unwilling to accept her victim status. The coachman turns around in astonishment, not expecting such a bold act. In the stillness of night, a young man anxiously looks around, confused about where the girl has vanished to. Renea hides behind a rock, holding her breath, as her pursuer desperately continues the search for her. The girl's heart races wildly. She almost got caught, but somehow manages to escape unnoticed. She remembers how once, in the darkness, a hand reached out to her, filled with care and unexpected support. In a sunlit clearing, the girl, still feeling quite bewildered, accepts the help from a stranger who is leaning down towards her. The man with a warm smile confirms his good intentions, illuminating her with the light of hope. Amidst golden flowers and sunlight, the young man gazes with admiration at the maiden, noting her true, exquisite refinement. Renea, with a gentle smile, recalls their magical first meeting, which ended in a wedding. In the dark night, she walks carefully through the woods, thinking about fate, not blaming herself for past dreams. Alone among the trees, she anxiously tries to understand where she is and what's happening. Suddenly, she hears sounds, and, thinking it's a wild animal, fear is reflected in her wide-open eyes. Overcome by panic, she realizes that she can't afford to perish like this, and desperately searches for a way out. Renea eagerly calls the beast to her, hoping to understand it better. A sudden encounter with a little girl leaves both of them bewildered, and they look at each other in surprise. In a brightly lit mansion, a maid rushes into the room with a question about the presence of Lady Renea. Shapiro, with a cup in hand, sternly notes that barging into someone else's home at this hour is rude. The maid nervously reports that Lady Renea cannot be found here, and doubts the success of the search. The man calmly replies that he sees no point in deceiving the guests while remaining unflappable. A maid enters the room, drawing the attention of those gathered with her worried appearance. The man anxiously asks if something has happened to Renea, his gaze growing increasingly wary. The maid explains that Renea still hasn't returned home after visiting the Lord's castle this evening. She nervously suspects the girl might have been kidnapped, and her words create tension in the room. The man clenches his fist, outraged by the kidnapper's audacity. Realizing they're talking about the great Veldemar's wife, he warns that if something happens to Renea before her wish is granted, the consequences will be severe, and his companion, confused, asks him to repeat himself. Veldemar's resolutely sets out on the search, understanding that he must find her at any cost. In the moonlight, near a forest cabin, exclamations of surprise are heard about how the girl found herself in such a situation. The girl, with a smile, refuses clean clothes, only asking to be shown the way to the village. At the table in a humble home, she confesses that she is currently escaping from her abductor. The man explains he knows a safe route, but warns it will take quite a long time to get there. The family admits they are also on the run, which surprises and evokes sympathy from the girl. Renea realizes with surprise and anxiety that their family owes money to the Guild of Colon, and this thought makes her ponder the future. A family, unable to handle their debts, must hide in the woods. Their home is filled with worry and fatigue. A tense atmosphere hangs over the table. Everyone regrets what happened and doesn't know what to say. Renea painfully realizes she'd never have borrowed from the lender if she'd known the consequences. At night, despite her exhaustion, she assures us she can handle it alone, hiding her worries behind a smile. Two watch her with anxiety, knowing she'll be awaited at the village entrance. Renea thanks them for their help, bowing low, bidding farewell to those who supported her in her time of need. She quietly asks for forgiveness, feeling guilty for the trouble caused. Under the starry sky, walking barefoot, she thinks she has met kind people. In the sunset's glow, the thought visits her that perhaps Edwin was right. Edwin sadly reproaches her for choosing to ignore problems and live a carefree life without worries. In the darkness, she wonders if she can continue to hold on to her old beliefs and views. She walks forward, wondering if she can forget what happened. Deep down, she doubts it's possible, and continues her journey down the darkened road. Reflecting on her past, she wonders if she should have tried harder, as perhaps she's been given a second chance. Suddenly, she lifts her gaze, struck by an unexpected thought. Realization dawns on her. Now she understands she must become a better person. At that moment, someone in the crowd calls her name, rushing to her anxiously. Edwin, breathing heavily, tries to comprehend if she's truly been kidnapped. The woman looks at him reproachfully, considering his behavior cowardly. At that moment, another man turns around, surprised by what is happening. Recognition dawns in his eyes, for they have met again after a long separation. Two strangers inquire if he is looking for his wife, and the tension between them escalates. Edwin confidently states that he will find her himself and asks not to worry. Beldemers, with his dark hair, cautiously expresses hope for success, reminding that a knight must be able to protect even his wife. Tension flares between the men, but one of them suggests joining forces for a common goal and focusing on the search. One of the group members decides to continue the search, but he's warned that the chosen path is useless as there's no road ahead. Beldemer, with cold confidence, poses a counter-question, doubting his companion's words and intentions. His companion, you see, she notices that he's probably just arrived in town, observing his behavior. Internally, he reminds himself that a lover must know their place, and he looks ahead with determination. Shapiro notes with surprise the arrogance of his companion, who seems quite concerned about Lady Renea's well-being. The dark-haired man irritably denies his feelings, claiming he only acts to fulfill her wishes and nothing more. He quickly leaves, while his companion smiles and agrees with his words. On the forest path, she warns that there is no road here. The man wonders if she plans to use magic for the search, as it could be crucial. He confirms that magic should assist, as it's all for Renea's sake. The man is confident that if Renea asks him to find her, he will definitely succeed. In the forest, a girl suddenly meets two men, and they are all surprised by the encounter. She recognizes one of them with astonishment and can't believe her eyes. Renea, standing barefoot on the grass, wonders if they really searched for her. She smiles, amazed at how he managed to find her in the end. In each other's arms, they finally find the long-awaited comfort and peace they seek. Renea, with relief and surprise, realizes he truly went out to search for her in the night. Despite his anger, the young man still made his way there, determined to find her. Meeting, they find themselves close, and the girl looks at him shyly, while he watches her reaction with mild bewilderment. Renea shyly makes excuses, and he looks at her intently, not understanding the reason for her agitation. The guy listens in surprise to her gratitude for him going to look for her. Beldemero explains that he only did it because she wanted him to, and she, laughing, still wants to thank him. A man and a woman walk together through the city's nighttime streets, discussing Shapiro's absence and his new assignment. A blond man with a serious expression stands at the entrance to the house, lost in thought. One of the men learns with relief and surprise that his wife has been found on the road, while the other confidently confirms it, adding that his master is never wrong. Edwin reacts reservedly to the news, clarifying that the visitor only came for this specific message. The second man smiles, saying he didn't want to waste his companion's time, though he acknowledges that quite a bit has already been spent. He says with a slight smirk that all attempts to avoid a divorce from Lady Renea will be in vain, despite all efforts. Edwin wonders in surprise if he is truly spending too much time on this matter after all. He starts to think about whether this is connected to his investigation of the second prince, lost in thought. A suspicion flashes in his mind: the lover might be behind the kidnapping. Meanwhile, the other person is saying goodbye. The man decides it's time to ask Basil to look into what's happening. In a cozy room, someone is surprised that they could be kidnapped at their age. The maid expresses her relief and joy that Milady is all right, while the girl shyly smiles at her reflection in the mirror. Renea resolutely takes the handle, contemplating the necessity of visiting her father. She realizes this day won't just be a visit to her father, but also an encounter with Veldemar. Already anticipating how eventful it'll be, the maid checks if anything else needs doing. Renea confirms there's another matter, leaving the maid feeling quite surprised. She dreamily thinks of a good deed while lying among the floral pattern. The maid watches her mistress with bewilderment, not understanding what she's up to. Suddenly, chaos erupts between them, as the girl complains that the maid has messed up her hair and ruined it. Renea, having fixed her hairstyle, knocks on Veldemar's door. Shapiro opens the door to her knock, inviting her in, and she's surprised by his presence. A man with a bandage on his forehead lies on the bed. His condition is alarming. Renea, frightened, takes his hand, noticing how cold it feels to her touch. Shapiro explains that the patient's temperature has dropped since last night, admitting he's never seen him like this. The girl, with anxiety, realizes that a doctor must be called urgently. Beldemar, lying in fever, desperately realizes that the doctor will not be able to cure him. He's trying to explain that something unusual is happening to him, and the girl anxiously watches his condition. Suddenly, he loses consciousness, and the girl, panicking, calls for help, believing Weldemar is dead. Shapiro rushes to them, and, examining the man, notices that he has simply fainted but is still breathing. Renea blames herself for what happened, regretting her past desires. She sadly bids farewell to Veldemar, asking for his forgiveness. Renea pleads with Veldemar, hoping he will regain consciousness soon. The man suddenly opens his eyes, as if coming back to life again. Shapiro and the girl watch in surprise as Veldemar regains consciousness and sits up in bed. The man, still groggy, responds uncertainly to the questions of those around him. He slowly gets up and, without answering the call, leaves the room, as if not hearing anyone around. In the quiet of the night, he heads towards his statue, while those watching him with concern note his strange behavior. Shapiro and Renea watch with concern as the man walks barefoot into the night, ignoring their questions and worries. They're confused, trying to figure out what he's going to do. Beldemir approaches the stone statue and slowly reaches out his hand. His palm touches the statue's chest, and a mystical glow begins to spread around. Rushing in despair, she lunges forward, trying to stop what's happening. She falls to her knees at the statue's base and gasps. A bright pink stone now glows in her hand. Renea stares at the statue in amazement and fear, clutching the glowing stone in her hand, and tries to understand what just happened.